Hey there. Tonight, we're not just taking a little trip back in time. We're tearing away the centuries until there's nothing left but raw earth and bone. Not a wheel in sight. No words. No fire. No walls to hide behind. We're going back 2 million years. You open your eyes to a world that does not care if you live or die. Your breath rises in little clouds. Your bare feet are sunk into dirt that's still cold from the night. Something buzzes in the grass. Something else growls. You're not human as you know it. Not yet. You are Homo habilis, small, quick, fragile, and brand new to the long experiment of survival. Before we go further, take a second to settle in. If you enjoy journeys like this, the ones that make the past feel like it's breathing beside you, tap the like button and subscribe only if you want to wander here often. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you right now, and what time is it for you? Now lower the lights. Let the room go quiet, except for the hum of your fan or the low noise outside your window. Breathe in once. Breathe out slowly. Let's step into that other world. You wake on the edge of a pale savanna, the horizon stretched flat and endless. The air is thin, cooler than you expect, laced with the smell of wet soil and crushed grass. It's beautiful, but every beauty here has teeth. Somewhere in the tall grass, something snaps a twig. Your skin prickles before your mind even forms the thought. You are barely a meter tall. Your arms swing long and loose at your sides. Your skull slopes back into a low ridge, and inside it, something hums. Instinct, curiosity, hunger. There is no language to name these things. Only sounds, a low grunt, a hiss through your teeth, a sharp breath when fear grabs you by the chest. The trees nearby are not just trees, they are sentinels, watching. Roots coil up from the ground like the knuckles of something ancient. The grass is thick and wet against your legs, each step heavy with dew. You move carefully. Here, a single broken stick can announce you to anything that's listening. You don't know this is East Africa. You don't know the word Africa. You know only heat, hunger, and the constant itch between your shoulder blades. The sense of being seen. A sour smell curls in the air. Closer with each breath. Something died here, and not long ago. You freeze. You listen. A deep, wet inhale comes from somewhere unseen. You back away. This is the rule. Predators eat first. Always. You keep moving. Over termite mounds that rise like towers. Past the shadow of a tree where baboons shriek and wrestle. The ground vibrates once, twice, with the weight of something heavy moving in the brush. A hippo maybe, or something worse. Your stomach twists. You find a cluster of berries, bright and tempting. But your kind has no written warnings, no elders telling you which will fill your belly, and which will stop it forever. You hesitate, and keep going. The sun climbs. Heat presses down on your back. You crouch by a stream and drink, ignoring the bitter taste. Somewhere upriver, a crocodile slips into the water unseen. But you feel the shift. Every choice here is life or death. And yet, even with danger in every shadow, there's a strange pull inside you. A wonder at the endless sky, the smell of new rain on dry dirt. The way the wind combs the grass until it looks like a living sea. This is the first lesson of your world. You will not conquer it. You will not master it. You can only endure it. One heartbeat, one breath, one cautious step at a time. The first fire, beginnings in the cold. The wind was not the same wind we know today. It was sharper, hungrier, carrying flecks of ice and breath from glaciers so vast, they silenced the rivers beneath them. This was a time when Europe lay in the grip of a deep glacial chill. Forests bowed low under snow-heavy branches. Animals did not cry in the dark. They listened instead. Somewhere along the edge of a frozen clearing, near where modern England lies now, there stood a place called Beech's Pit. Not by name, of course. Not then. But now, in our time, archaeologists have given it that name. And from the soil, they pulled blackened patches of earth, charcoal-rich sediment, flecks of burnt bone, and hearths more than 400,000 years old. Here, in the heart of a cold world, a human ancestor, perhaps Neanderthal, perhaps one of their earlier relatives, sat with hands wrapped around a glowing bed of embers. And this was the beginning of something different. This was fire. Fire, the discovery of controlled fire. For hundreds of thousands of years, hominins scavenged fire after lightning storms or volcanic eruptions. They might have carried it with them, tucked inside bark or glowing roots, tending to it carefully, like a fragile spirit. But at places like Beach's Pit, something changed. Repeated burn layers tell us they returned, not once, but again and again, to the same hearth. Flint tools were scattered around the ash, not in haste, but in patterns that suggest familiarity. Burned animal bones hint at cooking, not just warmth. Fire had become more than a discovery. It had become a rhythm, a ritual. We do not know what they called it, but in every hearth's glow, there was memory. The snow outside lay deep, silent. In the lee of a limestone overhang, a small group huddled. The flames danced across their coarse furs, lighting the creases of faces that had never seen a mirror. Children with thick brow ridges and strong hands. Women with powerful arms. Old ones, not many, but a few, who stared long into the coals as if remembering something they could not name. They were early Neanderthals, or perhaps Proto-Neanderthal, what we now classify as Homo heidelbergensis. Their bones have been found in sites like Atapuerca in northern Spain, where a shaft called Cima de los Huesos holds the remains of at least 28 individuals buried more than 400,000 years ago. These people were robust, intelligent, social, and they were learning to live with fire, not just survive it. Microscope archaeological evidence. Bilsingsleben. Far to the east, in what is now Germany, lies a site called Bilsingsleben, dated to approximately 370,000 to 400,000 BCE. This riverside location preserved not just bones, but circular arrangements of stone and wood, possibly the first signs of structure or shelter. There, archaeologists found stone tools made of flint and quartzite, crushed animal bones, likely from elephants, horses, and deer, burnt flint fragments, and fire-hardened sediments. Some of the skull fragments showed signs of trauma, intentional, ritual, conflict. We don't know, but we do know that fire was used in the vicinity repeatedly. Perhaps it warmed the injured. Perhaps it was used to clean hides. Perhaps to harden wooden spears. In that time, fire meant life. Boanero Skåningen, the wooden weapons. Now imagine walking further north, through dense pine and spruce forests, until you come to Skåningen, also in Germany. Here, 300,000 years ago, wooden spears were carefully shaped from yew wood, the same material used in medieval longbows. And they still survive today, preserved by ancient marshes, long, tapered, balanced, perfectly built for throwing. These spears weren't left behind by accident. Alongside them were horse bones, many showing signs of butchery. These people could hunt. And where there was meat, there was fire, not only to cook, but to preserve. Fire-dried strips of meat may have lasted for weeks during migration. Archaeologists believe this marks a turning point in Neanderthal ancestors' relationship to technology, wooden tools, fire, and teamwork coming together in survival. Narration, reflective, softly emotional. The air smelled of singed hair and cracked bone. The wind outside howled, but inside the shelter, silence. Only the soft pop of fat dripping into coals. A hand reaches down and turns a sliver of meat. Sparks leap upward. No words. Not yet. But everything important is known. The child watches her mother feed the fire. She learns not by instruction, but by repetition. Watching, waiting, knowing that if she feeds the wrong wood, it smokes. If she lays it wrong, it dies. The rhythm of survival is passed from hand to hand. DNA, the birth of a different human. Fossil evidence shows us that by this point, brain size was increasing. Neanderthals had larger average cranial capacity than even modern Homo sapiens, not because they were smarter in the modern sense, but because their lives required sensory and motor sophistication, coordination, and social memory. Fire enabled this evolution. It allowed for cooking, increasing digestibility of meat and plants, warmth in cold climates, expanding territory, protection from predators, social gathering after sunset, a new concept, softening of materials for tool use, healing the wounded. Imagine life without it. No light in winter, no way to eat fibrous roots or tough meat, no pause after dusk. Now imagine the first time fire was made, not found, not stolen from a lightning strike, but created. The scrape of flint on flint, a breath, a spark, and then a flicker. The face that watched it must have stared for hours. That fire may have gone out, but the knowledge stayed. Early ritual behavior? At Breniquel Cave in France, Neanderthals built circles of broken stalagmites, deep in the dark, more than 176,000 years ago. Burn marks show that fire was brought down into the cave's depths. No natural light, no functional reason, just presence. Some archaeologists believe this could be the earliest example of ritualized space, a place not for living, not for eating, but for being. Even then, fire was not just survival. It was meaning. They never named the fire. They didn't need to. It warmed the bones of children. It boiled the marrow from deer legs. It brought them one more night through a world that wanted them gone. And even now, when we burn wood in a fireplace or light a candle in a room, we are holding the same ancient memory, not of Neanderthal minds, but of Neanderthal hands, of people who lived without stories, yet created the warmth every story needs. The first fire, and it never truly went out. It was not just enough to find fire. They had to keep it alive, because in their world, fire was fragile. A gust of snow-choked wind could kill it. A misstep with wet bark could smother it. And once it went out, the cold came back. Fast, unforgiving. So they learned something that no animal had learned before. To carry the fire with them. Carrying fire, embers, bark, and strategy. Archaeological data from Beech's Pit, England, and Grotte du Lazaret, France, suggest repeated fire use at specific occupation levels over time, evidence of intentional fire return. But how? Researchers hypothesize that embers were preserved using dried moss, bark bowls, or even the cores of rotted tree trunks. When kept under ash, embers can smolder for up to 48 hours, long enough to migrate, to shelter, to survive. They likely wrapped fire in layers of hide, kept it against dry bone or kindling. Perhaps the oldest child carried it, or the most trusted elder, the one who never dropped anything, the one with the quiet hands. Because if you lost the ember, you lost the night. Globe showing Europe-Africa migrations guided by flame. The cold forced movement. Game migrated, forests shifted, glaciers crept forward. And in their footprints, the Neanderthals walked, hundreds of thousands of them, over tens of thousands of years. From the Dordogne Valley in France to the steppe edges of Ukraine, from central Germany's river corridors to the limestone caves of northern Spain, their movements were guided not by maps, but by memory and by fire. Charcoal has been found in layers across dozens of sites. Abercrombie, Spain hearth residues and ash lenses in repeated habitation layers. Grotte du Lazaret, France stone-lined hearths, spatial division of sleeping versus cooking areas. Cabra Cave, Israel ash layers alongside butchered animal remains. The fire left a record behind, buried deep. And where you find ancient ash, you find ancient people. A migration. The embers are packed tightly in moss. The father checks it again, second time this hour. He does not speak. He never speaks much. But this ember matters more than a word. The river below them is frozen. The sky is pale with snow. Behind them, emptiness. Before them, something. A place where the sun might return. The child at his side watches the bundle of bark he cradles in both hands. She doesn't know yet how to tend it, but one day she will. And if she doesn't, the line ends. They move across a land we now call Doggerland, now drowned beneath the North Sea. But then, it was a corridor of dry land connecting Britain to Europe, rich with reindeer, wild horse, bison, and pine forests. And they walked it, step by step, fire cupped in bone and bark, test tube fire evidence across layers. Experimental archaeology shows that controlled fire leaves specific residues: magnetic enhancement of soil, thermally altered lithics, calcined bone, white, fragile, burned at high temperatures. At sites like Torralba in Spain, these signatures appear next to butchered elephant bones, suggesting that early hominins may have used fire to cook, clean, and deter scavengers from massive kills. Elsewhere, like at Abercrombie, entire layers of ground show repeated fire use in the same locations over centuries, meaning there was spatial memory. They returned intentionally. Hearths were possibly assigned or inherited spaces. We're not talking about chaos. We're talking about structure, not in the modern sense. No houses, no roofs, but in the way we mark where we sleep, where we cook, and where we mourn. Even in a cave, there is order. Flashlight the light at night. Imagine it now. A fire flickering low, tucked near a rock wall. The cave smells of ash and damp fur. A wolf howls, distant. The child leans into her mother's side, listening to the crackle of the coals. She's never seen a star, not really. She's only ever known firelight and fog. The warmth touches her feet. For the first time today, she forgets her hunger. Just for a moment. Because the fire, it feels like something more than just heat. It feels like presence. Hammer and wrench tool-making beside the flames. The heat allowed something new, fine tools shaping at night. Without fire, work ended when the sun disappeared. With fire, it could continue. Knappers sat by glowing hearths and shaped flint into scrapers, knives, points. Each stroke echoed. Each blade was born from flame. This is confirmed at multiple Neanderthal sites. Flint microdebitage, tiny flakes of stone, found embedded in hearth ash, proving that stone tools were shaped beside fire, not in distant locations. It wasn't just practical. It was quiet ritual. Imagine the sparks rising, like stars, a reflection of the night sky outside. Imagine the way the knapper's breath fogs the air. Imagine the silence around the circle, not loneliness, but understanding. Brain's social bonding around the hearth. Modern neuroscientists believe that firelight may have shaped human social development. The flickering light lowers heart rate, slows thought patterns, and draws attention inward. It encourages storytelling, even before language. Emotional bonding, increased relaxation, and group cohesion. This is supported by research from Dr. Polly Wiesner and others, studying firelight behavior in the Kalahari Sand people. Their conclusions? Human attention changes around flame. We can project this back in time. For Neanderthals, the fire was not just biological utility, it was emotional architecture. A place to gather, to pass down gesture, to mimic, to touch hands, to notice the breath of another. This may be where empathy began. The ember sleeps inside its moss. Outside, the snow thickens. The child has fallen asleep. The mother tucks fur around her shoulders and stares at the coals. One of them cracks and splits, and the brief light catches in her eyes. She does not smile, but her face softens. She knows it must be fed again soon. The fire is a mouth that must never go hungry. In its glow, her child dreams. And in that dream, the snow has stopped falling. It was not just enough to find fire. They had to keep it alive, because in their world, fire was fragile. A gust of snow-choked wind could kill it. A misstep with wet bark could smother it. And once it went out, the cold came back. Fast, unforgiving. So they learned something that no animal had learned before. To carry the fire with them. Carrying fire, embers, bark, and strategy. Archaeological data from Beach's Pit, England, and Grotte du Lazaret, France, suggest repeated fire use at specific occupation levels over time, evidence of intentional fire return. But how? Researchers hypothesize that embers were preserved using dried moss, bark bowls, or even the cores of rotted tree trunks. When kept under ash, embers can smolder for up to 48 hours, long enough to migrate, to shelter, to survive. They likely wrapped fire in layers of hide, kept it against dry bone or kindling. Perhaps the oldest child carried it, or the most trusted elder, the one who never dropped anything, the one with the quiet hands. Because if you lost the ember, you lost the night. Globe showing Europe-Africa migrations guided by flame. The cold forced movement. Game migrated, forests shifted, glaciers crept forward. And in their footprints, the Neanderthals walked, hundreds of thousands of them, over tens of thousands of years. From the Dordogne Valley in France to the steppe edges of Ukraine, from central Germany's river corridors to the limestone caves of northern Spain, their movements were guided not by maps, but by memory and by fire. Charcoal has been found in layers across dozens of sites. Abercrombie, Spain hearth residues and ash lenses in repeated habitation layers. Grotte du Lazaret, France stone-lined hearths, spatial division of sleeping versus cooking areas. Cabra Cave, Israel ash layers alongside butchered animal remains. The fire left a record behind, buried deep. And where you find ancient ash, you find ancient people. A migration. The embers are packed tightly in moss. The father checks it again, second time this hour. He does not speak. He never speaks much. But this ember matters more than a word. The river below them is frozen. The sky is pale with snow. Behind them, emptiness. Before them, something. A place where the sun might return. The child at his side watches the bundle of bark he cradles in both hands. She doesn't know yet how to tend it, but one day she will. And if she doesn't, the line ends. They move across a land we now call Doggerland, now drowned beneath the North Sea. But then, it was a corridor of dry land connecting Britain to Europe, rich with reindeer, wild horse, bison, and pine forests. And they walked it, step by step, fire cupped in bone and bark, test tube fire evidence across layers. Experimental archaeology shows that controlled fire leaves specific residues. Magnetic enhancement of soil, thermally altered lithics, calcined bone, white, fragile, burned at high temperatures. At sites like Torralba in Spain, these signatures appear next to butchered elephant bones, suggesting that early hominins may have used fire to cook, clean, and deter scavengers from massive kills. Elsewhere, like at Abercrombie, entire layers of ground show repeated fire use in the same locations over centuries, meaning there was spatial memory. They returned intentionally. Hearths were possibly assigned or inherited spaces. We're not talking about chaos. We're talking about structure, not in the modern sense. No houses, no roofs, but in the way we mark where we sleep, where we cook, and where we mourn. Even in a cave, there is order. Flashlight the light at night. Imagine it now. A fire flickering low, tucked near a rock wall. The cave smells of ash and damp fur. A wolf howls, distant. The child leans into her mother's side, listening to the crackle of the coals. She's never seen a star, not really. She's only ever known firelight and fog. The warmth touches her feet. For the first time today, she forgets her hunger. Just for a moment. Because the fire, it feels like something more than just heat. It feels like presence. Hammer and wrench tool-making beside the flames. The heat allowed something new, fine tools shaping at night. Without fire, work ended when the sun disappeared. With fire, it could continue. Knappers sat by glowing hearths and shaped flint into scrapers, knives, points. Each stroke echoed. Each blade was born from flame. This is confirmed at multiple Neanderthal sites. Flint microdebitage, tiny flakes of stone, found embedded in hearth ash, proving that stone tools were shaped beside fire, not in distant locations. It wasn't just practical, it was quiet ritual. Imagine the sparks rising, like stars, a reflection of the night sky outside. Imagine the way the napper's breath fogs the air. Imagine the silence around the circle, not loneliness, but understanding. Brain's social bonding around the hearth. Modern neuroscientists believe that firelight may have shaped human social development. The flickering light lowers heart rate, slows thought patterns, and draws attention inward. It encourages storytelling, even before language. Emotional bonding, increased relaxation, and group cohesion. This is supported by research from Dr. Polly Wiesner and others, studying firelight behavior in the Kalahari Sand people. Their conclusions? Human attention changes around flame. We can project this back in time. For Neanderthals, the fire was not just biological utility, it was emotional architecture. A place to gather, to pass down gesture, to mimic, to touch hands, to notice the breath of another. This may be where empathy began. The ember sleeps inside its moss. Outside, the snow thickens. The child has fallen asleep. The mother tucks fur around her shoulders and stares at the coals. One of them cracks and splits, and the brief light catches in her eyes. She does not smile, but her face softens. She knows it must be fed again soon. The fire is a mouth that must never go hungry. In its glow, her child dreams. And in that dream, the snow has stopped falling. It was not just enough to find fire. They had to keep it alive, because in their world, fire was fragile. A gust of snow-choked wind could kill it. A misstep with wet bark could smother it. And once it went out, the cold came back. Fast, unforgiving. So they learned something that no animal had learned before. To carry the fire with them. Carrying ash is not just the end of fire. It is also the record it leaves behind. Soft, gray, silent. Ash tells us where they sat, where they lay, where they worked, where they said goodbye. In the darkness of caves, beneath centuries of sediment, ash holds the memory of every ember. And in that ash, archaeologists have begun to hear echoes of their lives. Test tube ash layers in Neanderthal sites. Let's look closer to Pech de l'As 4, a Mysterian site in southwest France. Here, multiple thin ash lenses were uncovered, thin bands of soft, gray-white sediment sandwiched between darker layers of soil and debris. These ash layers were thin but widespread, associated with hearths and living surfaces, found across sequential occupation periods, linked with stone tools, animal bones, and burnt wood fragments. This means the Neanderthals didn't just light fires anywhere. They returned to the same zones, over and over, maintaining sleeping areas, tool-working spots, hearth-centered activity clusters. Fire wasn't just utility. It was orientation, a center around which life unfolded. Magnifying glass tilted left fire as a tool for hygiene and safety. Ash also served another purpose, one they may have never spoken of, but understood. Cleanliness. Ashes. Antimicrobial. Moisture absorbing. Insect repelling. Odor masking. At sites like Roc de Marseille, ash was found under sleeping areas, along walls, and around fire pits. Not scattered, but layered and compacted, almost like bedding. Some archaeologists believe Neanderthals used ash as insulation against damp cave floors, to cover waste or food scraps, to smother insects or parasites, even to treat wounds, as some hunter-gatherers still do. This wasn't primitive behavior. This was applied knowledge, passed through experience. They didn't just survive. They adapted. Inside the shelter, she stirs the coals gently with a bone stick. The ash rolls like soft snow. The child coughs in her sleep, and the old woman places another layer of ash near her feet. The floor smells of dry smoke and pine needles. No mold. No crawling things. The fire keeps them warm. The ash keeps them clean. In the morning, they will dust the stone scraper with a bit of the ash. The grease comes off easier that way. It's something they've always done. No one questions it, but it works. And that's what matters. Axe fire and tool evolution. The connection between fire and tool advancement is found not just in proximity, but in what it allowed. Fire softened. Wood for bending or sharpening. Bitumen or resin for hafting stone to handles. Bone for piercing tools. Fibers for wrapping bindings. Fire hardened. Spear points. Clay and mud. Animal hide. Fire preserved. Meat and fat. Root vegetables. Fish if smoked. Sites like Grot 16 show layered occupations where heat-treated flint was possibly used. Fire allowed the stone to fracture more predictably, making finer tools possible. Fire didn't just feed the body. It fed invention. Brain the mindfulness of hearths. Every hearth was a lesson. Where the best fuel burned clean. What would smoke too much? How much space each person needed around the fire. Where sparks might leap. When coals were ready for cooking. We find signs of this in how hearths were built. Stone backings to reflect heat. Fire rings to contain sparks. Repeated placements along the same axis over centuries. This level of repetition suggests not instinct, but planning. It also suggests memory. They may not have drawn maps, but they remembered where to place the fire. Even in the dark. Broken heart fire and sorrow. Ashes also found beside the dead. At Le Moustier, La Pharisee, and Cabera, charcoal flecks rest in burial sediments. It is impossible to say if the fire burned before the death or after, but either way, the association is real. Perhaps a fire burned while they died, and those tending them stayed close. Perhaps the fire was lit after, a silent ritual of final warmth. It reminds us, they stayed when it hurt. They carried warmth into grief. They did not leave each other cold. No tools are needed to prove that. The ash speaks for itself. Long winter, final night. It has been snowing for days. The cave is silent. The oldest member of the group hasn't moved since morning. The fire is low, the logs burned down to black. The others sleep, curled tight. But the child is awake. She rises and walks to the elder. She watches him for a long time. Then she takes a twig, nudges the ember pile, and lays a pine branch across it. The fire lifts slightly, sparks rising, just enough to reach his face. She doesn't know why she does it, but the moment feels important. Microscope fire and mortality rates. Studies suggest that control of fire reduced infant mortality and extended lifespan among early humans, and likely Neanderthals as well. Cooked food improved nutrition. Warmth prevented hypothermia. Cleanliness reduced disease. Fire repelled predators. Light allowed for longer care of infants at night. It is not speculative. It is biological advantage. You don't need stories to evolve. You just need fire. And someone to keep it lit. The last of the coals glows red beneath a dome of ash. One by one, the small group presses closer, not from fear, but from habit. This is what they know. This is what they always do. There is no fire god, no prayer, no myth, only the warmth, the light, and the silent knowing that without it, they would be nothing. And so, again, they feed it. Just enough. Fire does not leave stories behind. Only ash. Only traces. Only warmth remembered in soil long cooled. But those traces are enough. Enough to tell us this. They stayed. They burned. They returned. And fire returned with them. Fire Brenique El Cave. Fire beyond function. In Breniquel Cave, deep inside the limestone chambers of southern France, Neanderthals built something no one expected. Rings of broken stalagmites, arranged deliberately, measured precisely, over 170,000 years old. And within the ring, charred bones, burnt fragments, and traces of low-oxygen fire use. This was no cooking site, no shelter, no workshop. This was symbolic fire. The flickering light cast against ancient stone, shadows moving without purpose, a structure made in darkness, too deep for sunlight to ever reach. Archaeologists have no consensus on its purpose, but even in silence, the fire meant something. Crescent moon symbolic space and presence. Across many sites, hearths reappear in the same places, not just within single occupations, but across generations. In Grot 16, stratigraphy reveals overlapping ash deposits, identical hearth dimensions, repeated fire building in the exact same place for centuries. Why? Because the place itself gained meaning. Because warmth had memory. Because someone once sat there, and others returned. The fire outlasted the firemakers. And in doing so, it became more than survival. It became presence. Brick Homo sapiens and the shared hearth. When anatomically modern humans spread into Europe around 45,000 years ago, they didn't invent fire anew. They adopted the same strategies, the same hearths, the same patterns of flame. At sites like El Salt, Spain, we find evidence of final Neanderthal hearths, followed closely by early modern Homo sapiens' use of the same caves, the same fire residues, the same spatial orientation. The light was passed, not directly, but through sediment, through habit, through ash. The flame continued. Scene, last fires of the Neanderthals. She places the last log into the fire. The wood is damp, but it catches. A slow hiss, then warmth. Her hands are cracked from cold, her fur cloak thin. Outside, the wind moves like a voice she cannot understand. Inside, nothing moves but the flame. The others are asleep. She is the last awake. She does not know what is coming. The change in the sky, the faces of strangers from the south, the slow disappearing of her kind. She only knows that the fire must not go out tonight. DNA a gift to us. Their flame in our blood. Today in our cells, each of us carries between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. Not from violence, not from conquest, but from shared shelter, from quiet coexistence, from warmth passed hand to hand. When the night is long and the wind howls, we still draw close to fire, still speak in soft voices around it, still feel its quiet rhythm, as if something ancient is listening. Because it is. The fire never ends, only changes. We've walked from Beach's Pit to Bilsingsleben, from Skåningen to La Pharisee, from Bruniquel to El Salt. And at each stop, we found the same thing. A circle of ash, a scatter of bones, a silence once filled with warmth. That is the Neanderthal legacy, not just genetics, but memory and fire, the only tool that lives. Final reflection, whispered, emotional. You are here tonight, listening, in the quiet. Maybe a candle flickers in the room. Maybe the light of a screen glows against your face. But somewhere deep in your chest, you carry the memory of that first hearth, not as a story, but as a shape, a comfort, a knowing. They never gave the fire a name, but we remember it still. And so long as we tend the flame, we remember them, before there were homes, before there were villages, before even the idea of a wall or a roof. There were cliffs, there were overhangs, there were caves carved by rivers, wind, and time. And into those shelters, the Neanderthals stepped, not to hide, but to stay, to sleep, to eat, to begin, perhaps for the first time, to understand what it meant to return. The natural shelter, Abric Romani. Along the edges of the Capellades cliffs in Catalonia, Spain, lies a place called Abric Romani, a rock shelter used by Neanderthals as early as 70,000 years ago. Layer after layer of occupation surfaces remain. Over 60 identified hearths, carefully spaced. Stone tool fragments. Animal bones broken for marrow. Wooden implements preserved in fine sediment. Cut marks on bones, evidence of butchery. Smashed long bones, for fat-rich marrow. What makes it remarkable isn't just the remains. It's how organized it all is. They came back, season after season. Year after year, perhaps generation after generation. In this open shelter beneath the cliff's brow, they built not homes, but habit. Wind face why shelters mattered. Neanderthals lived through harsh climatic oscillations. Cold glacial pulses could last decades. Even the interglacials, Warmer phases still brought biting wind and frost. Natural shelters offered wind protection, thermal buffering from rock mass, access to elevated visibility for game tracking, dry areas for sleeping, stone surfaces to reflect fire heat. And these weren't just places to pass through. They were chosen. Seen, entering a shelter. The group moves up the slope at dusk. A curved rock ledge juts from the cliff, its mouth dark but familiar. The boy steps into the shadows first, lifting his hand to the stone wall. Cold, dry, still. He knows where the ash pile is. He remembers where the last fire was set. His mother steps in behind him, dragging the pelt roll. No words, only the shuffle of stone beneath fur-wrapped feet. They're home, for now. Brick Lazarette Cave, a Neanderthal floor plan? On the Mediterranean coast of France, Grotte du Lazarette offers an extraordinary glimpse into Neanderthal shelter planning, possibly among the first ever. Inside the 30-meter-long cave, researchers discovered stone circles arranged like walls, animal hides likely used as partitions, clearly zoned activity areas, sleeping, working, butchering, a large hearth in the center, flint tools clustered in distinct places. This wasn't a campfire site. This was structured living. There is no sign of permanent architecture, no built walls or roofs. But the way they used the space suggests memory, assignment, roles. In other words, habitation, not just survival. Popperant's life in sheltered spaces, what the evidence tells us. From dozens of cave and rock shelter sites, archaeologists have pieced together a picture of daily life. Ice cube cold adaptation, fire hearths near rear walls to reduce draft, bedding layers made of moss or grasses over ash, windbreaks using stacked stones or hides, cut-of-meat food preparation, clusters of cut-marked bones, shellfish remains in coastal caves, e.g., Cueva Anton, burned bone fragments from marrow roasting, hammer and wrench tool use, flint knapping zones with high concentrations of waste flakes, resharpened scrapers and hand axes, tools with residue from meat, hide, wood, bed sleep and rest, clean bedding areas inferred from clean sediment patches, compact ash under resting zones, fewer tools or bones, suggesting purposeful cleaning. They made spaces without building anything. Their hands knew where to sleep. Their eyes recognized where the fire should go. Their feet avoided waste zones. This is not chaos. This is care. Brain, a different kind of intelligence. We must imagine Neanderthals not as wandering brutes, but as people who remembered places. In Abercrombie, some hearths are just 1 to 2 meters from the next, but each is distinct, a different time, different season, different group. Some include tiny wood chips, suggesting tool shaping beside fire. Others have no tools, only bones. Maybe a place to rest. They didn't write. They didn't farm. But they understood space. And in that, they were closer to us than we ever imagined. The night falls over the rock face. Wind whispers through the trees below. Inside the shelter, the group rests. The fire is quiet. The embers breathe. Each body curls near another. The air is dry, warmed by stone. A deer bone lies near the wall, scraped clean, cracked for marrow. Tomorrow they may leave, or stay another moon. But tonight, the shelter holds them, and in its shadowed silence, they sleep. They didn't always stay in caves. Sometimes there was no cave, only wind, only sky, only a gentle slope where the sun hit just right, only a bend in the trees where animals passed each spring. And still, they made shelter, because Neanderthals weren't only cave dwellers. They were planners, builders of the invisible, and they knew the land like we know our walls. Sunrise over mountains, evidence of open-air shelters. At a site in central France called La Folie, archaeologists found something rare. A shallow depression in the ground, circular in shape, about 4 meters wide. Inside it, charcoal lenses, fire traces, flint tools, butchered animal bones, post holes or stake impressions. What was it? Most believe it was a tent-like structure, built with animal skins, wooden poles, and stone rings to hold it down. It's not permanent. It's not grand, but it held a family, a fire, a memory. Like us, they made temporary homes. Moldova I, a mammoth bone shelter. Far to the east, in what is now Ukraine, the site of Moldova I offers one of the most astonishing finds in all of Neanderthal archaeology. More than 40,000 years ago, someone, or a group of someones, built a ring of mammoth bones, up to 8 meters across. Within the circle, central hearth, stone tools, charcoal-rich soil, burnt bones, layers of ash and sand. It wasn't a hut in the modern sense, but it was something else. A boundary, a sanctuary, a way to define the edge of their world in an open space. They gathered bones, arranged them, and burned fire inside the circle, not for glory, but for survival. A shelter on the plain. The winds move in waves. Grass bends, flat and rippling. A small cluster of figures kneel in the dusk. Their hands wrap hide around 3 poles. A child holds a bone spike steady. The mother lashes the cord. Tight, smooth, firm. Nearby, 2 boys drag the last mammoth rib into place, setting it into the ground. Facing east, away from the storm. The fire crackles in a small ring of stones. No roof yet, but soon. And when the wind howls, they will not hear it as loudly. Compass understanding space, wind, and safety. There's a pattern in where shelters are found, and it's not random. Neanderthals consistently chose south-facing slopes, sunlight, warmth, near rivers or freshwater springs, high ground with game visibility, natural windbreaks, boulders, tree lines, ridges. Sites like Tor Faraj and Jordan reveal carefully chosen overhangs where hearths were placed away from drafts, tools shaped close to sleeping areas, and bones stacked for later use. Even in the most basic shelter, the world was organized. Older adult caring for the weak, the elderly, the wounded. Neanderthals didn't abandon their own. We know this from skeletons like Shanidar I, Iraq, adult male with withered arm, crushed eye socket, deaf, yet lived decades. La Chapelle aux Saints I, France, elderly male with severe arthritis, loss of teeth. El Sidron, Spain, DNA analysis of a family group showing inherited disorders. These people were kept alive, fed, protected, warmed, in a harsh world with no medicine that required fire, shelter, hands that stayed. They didn't have words for empathy, but they had actions. They had blankets of fur and places by the fire. They had soft hands and quiet gestures. And when the wind grew too loud, they stayed beside those who could no longer walk. Flashlight evidence from shelter floors. The floors of Neanderthal shelters, both caves and tents, speak of presence. At Grotte 16, a shelter in southwestern France, distinct zones were identified: resting areas, hearths, working surfaces. Fine ash layers show where bedding was likely laid. High concentrations of tiny flint chips suggest seated work beside fire. They didn't build furniture, but they built rhythm. Each movement left a mark. Each tool had a place. Each space held memory. The sick one, the elder coughs. His breath rattles in his chest. The boy holds a gourd of water near his lips. The fire is stoked higher than usual. The cave is too damp, the air too thin. A woman tucks dried moss beneath his shoulder. The heat rises. The fur blanket holds it close. No one says anything. There is no medicine. But they stay. And that is something. Stop sign, temporary shelters, lasting impressions. Most Neanderthal shelters left little trace. A ring of stones. A patch of scorched soil. A scatter of broken tools. But what they show us is enough. They returned to favorite places. They changed their structures seasonally. They adapted their design to terrain and threat. A bone ring in a steppe. A windbreak of logs in a valley. A hide tent stretched between trees near a stream. And in each, a fire, a family, a breath of warmth. The shelter was never meant to last. It was always borrowed. From the land, from the wind, from time itself. But the feeling it gave, the moment of being wrapped in warmth, the sound of rain outside while inside the fire crackled, that remains. Even now, when we step under a roof after a long walk in cold air, we remember. We don't know we remember, but we do. Because once, long ago, someone bent bone into a circle, and someone else lit the fire inside. They didn't have roads. They didn't carry maps, but they knew how to return, how to find the same bend in the river, the same overhang near the deer path, the same slab of stone where warmth once lived. The land itself was their memory, and year after year, generation after generation, they came back, to shelter, to safety, to places made sacred not by belief, but by survival. Compass seasonal shelter patterns. Archaeological layers show that many Neanderthal shelters were used again and again, but not continuously. Instead, they returned. In winter to deep caves, insulated from snow and wind. In spring to open rock shelters near rivers, where animals gathered. In late summer to high ground, tracking migrating herds. In autumn to forested regions, collecting roots, nuts, and wood. At Abercrombie, at least 25 distinct Neanderthal occupations have been identified, layered over time. Each layer contains new hearths, fresh tools, bones from different seasons, unique ash spreads. They left, but they always knew how to come back. World map memory in the land. They had no calendars, but they had stars. They had shadows. They had the sound of streams, the curve of valleys, the call of cranes in the marsh. They had rock formations that never changed, tree patterns burned into memory, the scent of caves where children once slept. And when they returned, months or years later, they recognized it. Some sites show old hearths cleared out and reused, new fires built beside old ones, bone caches left for later retrieval. Like us, they knew where they had been, and that mattered. What they carried. Excavations show that Neanderthals traveled light, but not empty. They often brought tool cores, shaped stones that could be struck later, prepared hides or fur bedding, embers preserved in moss and bark, food, dried meat, marrow-filled bones, possibly charcoal for marking or ritual, and what they left behind: heavy broken bones, stone napping waste, large flint flakes, sometimes the dead. At El Sidron, a group of 12 Neanderthals, possibly a family, were found deep inside a cave in northern Spain. They may have died together or been left behind by survivors. Among their remains, tools, cut-marked bones, genetic traces of shared bloodlines. Not just shelter, but home, or the last memory of one. A return. The trees part as the woman crests the hill. Below her, the cliff, the same one from 3 winters ago. She recognizes the curve of the overhang, the black streak on the wall from a fire long gone. She steps closer. The ash is scattered. Wind has buried the bones. But beneath her feet, she knows. This is the place where she bore her daughter, where her brother sharpened tools, where her mother died. She kneels, places her hand to the stone. Still cold, still home. Evidence of shelter reoccupation. At sites like Le Moustier, Pêche de l'Aise, Grotte 16, we find layer after layer of returning presence. Fire pits in nearly identical places. Hearths surrounded by new flint flakes. Bone piles restacked, reused. Footwear patterns inferred from trampled sediments. In some caves, you can trace 4, 5, even 6 generations of Neanderthals returning. It's not permanent housing, but it's rhythmic, remembered, reverent. Brick floors as memory maps. Sediment analysis lets us see where they sat, slept, cooked, gave birth, knelt to break bone, carved hide, mourned. Every layer is a snapshot of a moment, a season, a night beside the fire. And sometimes, the fire returns right where it once was. The same spot, the same ring of stone, as if someone remembered the warmth that had once touched that soil. Leaving again, they pack what little they brought. The fire has burned down. The ash is cool. She kicks loose dirt over the coals, not to bury it, but to protect it. They will return. They always do. She places a stone at the entrance. Just one. It marks nothing, but she will remember it. A shape, a signal, a promise. The wind pushes gently at her back. Brain Neanderthals and spatial memory. Their brain structures, particularly the parietal lobes, suggest strong visuospatial mapping, acute landscape memory, high sensitivity to environmental landmarks, and their behavior supports it. Flint from distant quarries brought into familiar shelters, movement along known migration corridors, reuse of fire sites with millimeter precision, no drawings, no writing, but something deeper, a mind shaped by space, and a soul shaped by the warmth of where they once slept. They come, they leave, they return, like the wind, like the snowmelt, like the herds. But what they left stayed. The fire circles, the bones, the soft floor where someone once laid a sleeping child. Not a home with walls, but a home made of presence, of memory, of return. And in that rhythm, they lived. The storms came hard in their world, not like ours, brief and distant, but long, relentless. Winds that screamed through the trees like wolves, rain that turned stone paths to rivers, snow that buried trails, covered bones, and made fire a sacred thing. And when those storms came, they did not run. They stayed, inside their shelters, inside the breath of the fire, inside each other's warmth, and waited, cloud with rain inside during the storm. Archaeological evidence tells us that Neanderthal groups stayed inside shelters for days or even weeks at a time. In sites like Roc de Marseille, El Salt, Grot 16, we find layers of compacted ash and sediment from continuous fires, dense concentrations of tools and flint flakes in tight areas, burnt bones in low-oxygen environments, suggesting indoor cooking during poor airflow, ash bedding relayered multiple times. They didn't only use the shelter, they lived inside it. And in the dark hours, they created a different kind of world. A storm, rain lashes the rock face outside. The wind hammers the cliff. Inside the cave, the fire glows low, protected by a half-wall of stone. A woman sits against the back wall, her arms wrapped around a fur bundle. Inside it, a sleeping child. 3 others work slowly, slicing sinew, mending hide, watching the entrance. An old man lies with his face turned away, breathing the warmth. They don't speak. The storm is too loud, but they don't need to speak. They are safe, and safety is enough. Bed bedding and floor care. At Abercrombie, researchers uncovered layers of compacted plant material mixed with ash, evidence of sleeping zones near hearths, distinct areas where stone debris was absent, suggesting purposeful cleaning. At Grot 16, Neanderthals created multi-layered bedding, ash base to repel moisture and insects, dried grasses, tanned hide or soft fur on top. The hearth was never in the center of sleep. It was close, but not touching. They knew how far was far enough. They knew when to add ash, when to stir coals, when to let it fade. The rhythm of the fire. Fires burned constantly during storms and winter. But fires were alive. They needed fuel, breath, touch. Every few hours, someone had to wake, add a branch, turn the embers, clear the ash. And so they took turns, not because of rules, but because of rhythm. In Lazaret Cave, we find sequential hearths placed near windbreaks, charred bones and long-burning wood types, fragments of fire-hardened tools, fire residues consistent with multi-day burning. They did not leave the fire, and it did not leave them. The firekeeper. She wakes before the others. The storm still rumbles outside, quieter now. The embers are fading. She leans forward, careful not to wake the child beside her. Her hands find the dry pine branch near the stones. She lays it gently across the coals. Waits. A breath of smoke. Then a flicker. The warmth deepens. The others sleep on. She lies back, and in the darkness, listens to the wood begin to crackle. Children in shelter. What were Neanderthal children like? Their fossils show rapid growth, broad builds, like their parents, evidence of early tooth wear, suggesting meat diets, some skeletal trauma, likely from rough terrain or close quarters play. But inside the shelter, they were likely watched, taught by imitation, given small jobs, carrying sticks, softening hides, arranging tools. At Roc de Marseille, the remains of a 2-year-old child were found, curled near a hearth, wrapped in sediment mixed with ash, possibly buried, or simply left gently after death. The space had held life and love, and the fire had burned beside it. Flashlight intimacy in enclosed spaces. In the deep recesses of caves like Bruniquel and La Pharisee, there are signs of ritual, stillness, quiet presence. Not just survival, but meaning. In shelters, they may have shared stories through gesture and shadow, watched flames together after meals, cleaned tools side by side, grieved in silence. In the flicker of firelight, a hand moves across fur, not as work, but as memory. They lived close, closer than we can imagine, and from that closeness grew something almost like thought. A night together. The fire is down to coals now. The child has woken, not afraid, only watchful. He turns to his sister beside him. She stirs, opens one eye, then closes it again. He reaches out, small fingers touching the fur draped over her shoulder. Outside, the wind shifts. The storm has passed. The cave is still. He closes his eyes again, and dreams not of danger, but of light, brain interior life, reconstructed from evidence. In site reconstructions, we find evidence of individual activity clusters, areas where certain tools were always made, specific zones for meat cutting, hide scraping, fire tending, clean zones where children may have rested, caches of tools placed intentionally for later use. This is not just occupation. This is life. They lived in these spaces, not just as animals, but as feeling beings. And every act, every touch of ash or stone, left a trace. The storm is gone. The cave holds only the breath of sleeping bodies. The air is warmer now. The earth still damp outside. But in here, all is still. The fire sighs. The children dream. The woman stirs, then settles. Tomorrow they may leave, or build a wall of bones, or watch a newborn arrive. But tonight, they are only this, warm, together, and silent beneath the sheltering stone. Fire the final fire. Many Neanderthal sites show signs of last fires. A final ash layer, no tools above it, no new bones, no more tread in the sediment. The flame was not just extinguished, it was closed. At Pech de Las, one hearth was covered with a layer of stone flakes, almost like a lid. At Grot 16, a final occupation layer ends with a clean fire and no debris. At La Pharisee, a burial is the last sign of use, as if the fire's purpose had passed. Perhaps they covered it with soil. Perhaps they watched it die. Perhaps they said nothing and simply turned away. But it ended, and they remembered where. The cold hearth. The fire has burned out. Ash curls in soft spirals. A single stick, half charred and used, lies beside it. No one moves. The group stands in the cave's mouth, looking out at the trail ahead. The child turns once, touches the stone wall. Faint soot from hundreds of fires blackens his fingertips. He looks at his mother. She nods. They begin to walk, and the cave is quiet. Globe showing Europe, Africa, the shelter stays. They moved on, but the shelter remained. Stone does not forget. Ash remembers in silence. The earth holds footprints, pressed by lives now gone. And sometimes, they came back. The next layer in the soil shows. A new fire, built where the last one had died. A new knife, struck from the same flint. A deer, butchered beside the same wall. A child's tooth, dropped where another once slept. Nothing was exactly the same, but something felt familiar. And that familiarity With shelter too. Brain the psychology of return. To leave a shelter is to leave part of the self behind. But to return is to recognize the self again. Even without language, Neanderthals likely felt attachment to places, memory of warmth and death, rhythms of seasons, light, direction, recognition of where they had once survived. They did not build shrines, but they returned to caves where someone had died. They reused hearths where fire had once healed. They stepped again into silence and understood it. That is memory. That is presence. That is a kind of soul. They did not stay. They never meant to. The shelter was always borrowed. The fire always temporary. The bones always waiting. But in those spaces, beneath cliffs, inside caves, beneath stretched hides and bones, they found something that looked like rest, something like safety, something like home. And when they walked away, they left behind more than ash. They left behind a place that waited for them, a silence that still breathes, a stone that still holds their warmth. And tonight, you carry that warmth too. They didn't have words for sharp. They didn't call it craft. They didn't name the tools in their hands. But they knew. They knew the feel of a flint flake struck just right. The dull ache in the wrist after a long day napping stone. The sting of a missed strike that sliced too deep. They knew when the edge was ready, when the point was strong, when the grip would hold, even with blood on their hands. They were the ones who made tools, and through their tools, they shaped the world. The Mysterian tradition. Across Europe, from France to Croatia, the Mysterian tool industry defines the technological life of the Neanderthals. It lasted for more than 200,000 years, far longer than any modern technological tradition. Mysterian tools were made primarily from flint, chert, or quartzite, created using the Levallois technique, a prepared core method, designed for cutting, scraping, piercing, and shaping. Common tools include scrapers for hide preparation, points, likely hafted onto wooden spears, notch tools for gripping fibers or softwood, denticulates, saw-like edges for carving. At sites like Le Moustier and La Pharisee, these tools appear in high numbers, with evidence of resharpening over time, use wear patterns from repeated contact with hide and bone, intentional design variation based on function. They weren't improvising. They were planning. The flint nappers. The boy sits with the stone in his lap. His father is beside him, silent, watching. He lifts the hammerstone. Not hard, not too soft. The flint core is round, dark, cold. He strikes. A sharp chink rings out. A flake skitters away. Too thin. He tries again. This time better. A sliver curls cleanly from the core. The edge is smooth, slicing. The father nods once. The boy says nothing, but his hands remember. Microscope, motor memory, and intelligence. The Levallois technique, central to Mysterian tools, required planning 3 or more steps ahead, rotating the core between strikes, preparing a convex surface, detaching a predictably shaped flake. Cognitive demands included 3D spatial reasoning, manual precision, memory of material properties, teaching and learning over time. This level of tool production demonstrates a working memory system, intergenerational knowledge transmission, likely nonverbal teaching methods. And in the archaeological record, we find repeated error patterns, learning in progress, child napping flakes alongside expert debris, resharpened tools used across multiple tasks. The Neanderthals were not copying nature. They were inventing function. Hammer and wrench toolkits, not just tools. At Coombe Greenall and Vindige, entire toolkits were uncovered, not random collections, but carefully transported bundles of selected implements. Tools grouped by purpose, evidence of long-distance material movement. This shows intentional curation, an understanding of need across time and space, planning ahead, not just reacting to the moment. In essence, they had memory in their hands, and when they made tools, they weren't just solving a problem. They were expressing a way of being. The hide scraper. She turns the deer hide over her knee. It is tough, wet, stubborn. The meat has been cut, but the skin resists. She takes the scraper, sharp, curved, familiar. The edge glides under the membrane. The flesh parts. She repeats the motion. The tool fits her hand exactly. She shaped it that way. Smoothed the back. Balanced the weight. She's used it for weeks now. Soon it will dull. Then she will trade it for a new flake. But tonight, it still cuts. Brain neurological implications. Toolmaking stimulates regions in the brain associated with language, sequencing, fine motor skills, problem solving. Neanderthal brain endocasts show large parietal lobes, important for spatial perception, dense motor cortex development, possibly more robust sensorimotor processing than Homo sapiens. While they may have lacked the vocal complexity of modern humans, they had quiet minds with busy hands. And through those hands came the tools. They didn't name their tools, but they knew them. They knew their weight, their sound against bone, the feeling when a fresh flake slid across hide. Each one was an extension of their bodies, a memory cast in stone, a gesture repeated for generations. And when the tool broke, they made another, not because they hoped, but because they knew. This was how life was shaped. In stone, in silence, in skill. The tools were not just things. They were decisions. They were habits. They were extensions of memory, carried not only in the hand, but in the rhythm of the wrist, in the angle of the strike, in the pause before pressure. And each tool, every scraper, point, notch, and flake, tells a story, not in words, but in wear. Magnifying glass tilted left, tool, specialization, and function. Mysterian toolkits were not all the same. In fact, they show clear signs of specialization. Scrapers, for processing hides and sinew. Points, possibly hafted onto spears. Notches, for cutting through tough fibers or plant stems. Denticulates, with serrated edges for woodwork. Burins, narrow-edged tools for incising bone or antler. At Aubry-Perroni in France, microscopic usewear analysis showed scrapers with consistent motion striations used on dry hide. Points with impact fractures, likely from thrusting. Stone flakes with residue of plant starches and silica, showing plant processing. These weren't all-purpose tools. They were made for specific tasks. Someone knew how to shape exactly what was needed. Brain insight into daily tasks. By studying the microscopic grooves on Neanderthal tools, scientists have uncovered right or left-handed preference, about 85% right-handed. The difference between slicing, scraping, and drilling motions. How deeply they processed hides, softening, thinning, drying. Where they carried the tools, were from rope loops or waist tucks. How often they were resharpened. Tools were recycled again and again. This gives us unspoken truths. Who sat by the fire to work hides? Who broke bone with choppers? Who carved a hole in wood? Who passed a worn tool to a child and said nothing, but showed? The bone tool. He leans into the light. The hide is almost dry. It resists now, stiff and greasy. He takes a scraper, the one he reshaped 3 days ago. The edge is dulled. He could use a flake, but this one fits his fingers better. He presses down and pulls. The fat peels away in gray strips. Behind him, a boy watches. The man pauses, hands the tool over. The boy grips it, awkward. Presses. Slips. Fails. The man says nothing. He just waits. Hammer and wrench repair. Reuse. Repeat. Neanderthal toolmakers were not wasteful. They resharpened dulled edges, sometimes dozens of times. Reused flakes as new cores. Created multifunctional tools, points that became scrapers. Designed tools to be light and portable during movement. Left behind workshop zones filled with flakes from repair work. At El Salt, Spain, scientists found cores reduced down to the final usable flake. No waste. Every edge was used. Every tool had a lifespan, and sometimes a second life. Microscope emotional intelligence in craft. We cannot know their feelings, but we can infer their relationships to objects. Some tools show unusual symmetry, not required for function, are shaped with extra polish or smoothing on the back, are found buried with the dead, are carried long distances across entire migration routes. What does that tell us? That perhaps some tools were favorites, some were passed down, some were shaped for the sake of shaping. Craft was not just a need, it was a kind of knowing, a quiet pride. The favorite tool, the scraper, has a chip near the base. He knows it, has felt it against his palm every day. He could fix it. He won't. It fits him now. The imperfection tells him where to grip. He carries it in a loop of hide on his belt. Every night, he touches it before sleep. Not because it matters, but because it's his. Magnifying glass tilted right social structure through tools. We can also infer roles in Neanderthal groups from tool types. Some individuals made more complex tools, suggesting expertise. Others used only basic flakes, apprentices, or children. Tool clusters suggest shared labor. One group cuts, another scrapes. Elderly individuals may have focused on maintenance or teaching. There were no specialists in the modern sense, but there were patterns. And through those patterns, we glimpse community, not loud, not ranked, but moving around fire and stone. In rhythm, the edge dulls, the hand adjusts, the strike begins again. This is how they lived. Not in monuments, not in words, but in stone shaped with thought, with habit, with care. And every flake that falls to the cave floor is a whisper, not of what they said, but of what they knew. No one taught them with words. No one said, do this, do that, or this is how you make a knife. But still, they learned, because they watched, because they felt, because the hands that came before them left behind more than tools. They left behind motion, and that motion was memory. Baby children and the first flint flakes. We know Neanderthal children participated in tool making. How? Because of the scatters. At sites like Konprusi Cave in modern-day Czechia, archaeologists uncovered clusters of tiny flint flakes, only a few centimeters wide. Erratic break patterns, inconsistent angles. No consistent shaping, but many attempts. These flakes likely came from children learning to nap, early-stage observation and mimicry, guided repetition beside older relatives. The flakes sit near adult-made tools, not across the cave, but beside them. They worked side by side. First lessons. He sits in the dust. The flint core is heavy in his lap. Too heavy, really. His mother kneels beside him. She's shaped 3 scrapers already today. He mimics her grip. Tries to strike. Too weak. The flake splits wrong. He frowns. She doesn't speak. Only turns his hand slightly. Presses his fingers into the stone. He tries again. This time, the flake sings. Experimental archaeology and learning by doing. Modern flint knappers can replicate Mysterian tools, and what they find is clear. Learning requires hundreds of tries. Muscle memory forms slowly. Every mistake teaches pressure, angle, grip. Verbal instructions are unnecessary. This supports the theory that Neanderthal learning was nonverbal, demonstration-based, rooted in repetition and touch. It was not school. It was life. And the cave was the classroom. Brain cognitive implications of teaching. The ability to teach and transmit skill requires understanding the learner's point of view, breaking a task into steps, patience, intergenerational trust. At Cima de las Palomas, researchers uncovered a small group of individuals. A child, 2 adults, shared tool scatters and bone piles. This suggests shared spaces, shared tasks, learning in intimate circles. They didn't just teach how to survive. They taught how to shape the world. The apprentice. The girl is older now. Her flakes are smoother. She's learned where to strike the core, where the edge glints, where the stone wants to break. But her new flake is long and curved, too thin. She hands it to her grandfather. He turns it in his hand, nods. He takes a deerskin, presses the edge. It slices clean. He looks at her. Doesn't smile, but keeps the tool. She knows what that means. Child gender in toolmaking. Who taught? Who learned? We don't have clear physical evidence for gender roles, but we do have clues. From sites like Pear in France, tool residues show that both men and women engaged in hunting and plant gathering. Some individuals used tools for plant processing, others for meat and bone. Microwear patterns suggest diversity of task, not rigid roles. This suggests children likely learned from any adult nearby. Roles were flexible. Craft was communal, not hierarchical. The idea of father teaches son is too modern. What mattered was the tool, and the hand that was ready to hold it. Compass passing on craft as culture. Mysterian tools lasted for over 200,000 years. That's not luck. That's transmission. At Le Moustier, some layers show tools made exactly the same way across centuries. This suggests teaching was consistent. Techniques were valued and protected. Tools carried social meaning. And for the learner, each flake was a step into the world. Each edge a rite of passage. The knife passed down. He unwraps the tool from a bundle of hide. It's old, dull now, but beautiful. Balanced. Heavy. Smoothed along the back. It was his uncle's. Before that, his grandmother's. He runs a finger along the curve. Strikes a new flake. Binds it to the handle. A new edge. Same hand. Repeat button, the cycle of teaching. We see in the archaeology. Beginners beside masters. Debris of learning layered into living floors. Repairs made to pass down blades. Fire circles surrounded by cores, flakes, completed tools. This wasn't apprenticeship in a formal sense, but it was transmission. And through it, they left behind a world shaped by memory. You can't touch a stone flake and not feel something ancient, because in its edge is the moment someone tried, failed, tried again, then passed that shape into another's hands. They didn't call it teaching, but we do, and every blade that lasted was a lesson remembered. Stone met bone, again, and again, and again. It didn't matter how sharp the edge. The work was always slow, messy, grueling, and necessary, because the tool was survival. Cut of meat butchery and the stone edge. At sites like Abercrombie, La Quina, and Vindija Cave, archaeologists have uncovered butchered bones with parallel cut marks. Stone flakes stained with iron-rich residues, blood. Impact fractures from marrow extraction. Flake edges worn down from tendon removal and hide cutting. Neanderthals used tools to skin animals, detach limbs, strip muscle, break bone, extract marrow, scrape hide. At Abercrombie, over 100,000 bones show butchery traces, not scattered randomly, but organized near hearths, close to tool fragments. It was work done near fire. Repeated, routine, relentless. Butchering the bison. The bison lies still. Its ribs are cracked wide. Steam rises from the cavity. She kneels in the cold earth, hands inside. The scraper is dull at the tip. She adjusts her grip. Begins again. Pull. Slice. Pull. Slice. The tendon parts. She tosses it into the pile. Goes back for more. By sunset, the hide is done, and her hands ache. Fire tools and fire. A shared function. Tools and fire were not separate worlds. They were entwined. Tools shaped. Firewood, trimmed to length. Kindling, stripped from bark. Hearth rings, arranged with stone. Wooden sticks, fire hardened by flame. At Schöningen, Germany, archaeologists discovered wooden spears over 300,000 years old, perfectly balanced and fire hardened at the tips. Found beside butchered horse bones and flint tools. This proves tool users understood fire treatment. Stone and wood were integrated into hunting systems. They weren't just working in parallel. They were designing survival. Hammer hafting, combining stone and wood. Many Mysterian tools were hafted, bound to wood or bone handles using animal sinew, birch pitch, early adhesive, plant fiber or leather thongs. Microscopic residue studies show tar or pitch traces on tool bases. Binding wear marks. Edge beveling shaped to fit handles. This shows planning and foresight. Material knowledge. Use of composite technology centuries before Homo sapiens in many regions. Hafted tools were more efficient. They reduced injury, improved control, lasted longer. They weren't just tools. They were designs. Making the spear. The flake is sharp. The stick is smooth, carved down with stone. He presses the flake into the notch, tight. He wraps sinew, pulling hard. It cuts into his fingers. He doesn't stop. He chews pitch, smears it across the binding. The smoke from the fire warms the glue. The flake sets. He holds the spear up. Balanced. Deadly. It's not beautiful. It's ready. Skull the cost of the tool. Neanderthal bones show. Muscle insertion stronger than ours. Joint wear from repetitive stress. Elbow and shoulder damage in dominant limbs. Healed fractures in knuckles, wrists, and collarbones. The work took a toll. To make tools. To use them. To sharpen them again. Day after day. No gloves. No chairs. Only bone and stone and fire. Even children bore signs of overuse. They gave themselves to the task. And still, they shaped more. Brain emotion in tool use. We can't measure emotions in the archaeological record, but we can feel them. Because some tools were kept longer than needed. Some were carefully reworked. Some were buried with the dead. Some bore polish that served no function. Some were found beside the remains of children and elders. Tools weren't just used. They were held, trusted, and carried through change. And sometimes, they were all they had. The cracked tool. The scraper snaps in her hand. She stares at it. Not angry. Not surprised. She turns it, weighing what remains. There's still a usable edge. One side. She reshapes the handle. Binds it again. It's not what it was. But it's still hers. Bed evenings with tools. Night fell early. After the hunt. After the skinning. After the meal. They sat. And they resharpened. Cleaned. Rewrapped bindings. Chipped fresh cores. Passed stones from hand to hand. In these moments, tools became companions. Familiar. Trusted. Not worshipped. But understood. They lived in the silence between effort and sleep. They did not write poems, but they carved meaning into the shape of an edge. And every time the flint split clean, every time a sinew pulled tight, every time blood soaked into a handle, they became more than tool makers. They became rememberers of shape, of purpose, of what the hand knows. When the mouth says nothing, they made tools for over 200,000 years. Then, they stopped. Not suddenly, not all at once, but slowly, as the last hearths dimmed and the last hands cooled. The sound of flint striking flint faded. But the tools, they stayed. And in the silence, they waited to be found. Tools and burial. At multiple Neanderthal burial sites, we find tools placed near the dead. At La Pharisee, several stone tools were discovered in children's graves. At Le Moustier, a young Neanderthal was buried in fetal position, scrapers nearby. At Cabera, the famous adult male, Moshe, was buried without his skull, but with bone tools in the grave fill. At Ahmed Cave, a child lay beside a red deer bone and a tool fragment. These placements suggest tools held value beyond use. Tools may have been gifts, identifiers, or tokens, a recognition that tools accompanied life and might accompany death, even when the maker no longer breathed. The edge remained. The grave. The girl's body lies curled. The fire has gone cold. The mother kneels. Her face is blank. Her hands, moving. She places a scraper near the child's ribs. It's worn smooth. Not sharp anymore. It was the girl's first tool. Not useful, but hers. The mother rises. Says nothing. Covers her in fur. Magnifying glass tilted left symbolic tool placement. There is debate among archaeologists about whether Neanderthals created symbolic meaning through tools. But at sites like Bernequal, La Pharisee, and El Sidron, we find tools deliberately arranged in circles or near remains. Scrapers left in caves and used. cut marks on animal bones placed beside tools, spatial clustering without practical explanation. These might be ritual behaviors, social gestures, emotional acts of parting. There were no ceremonies, no altars, but there was placement, and in that placement, a kind of language, legacy in stone. The last Neanderthals died out around 40,000 years ago, but their tools remained, buried in caves, cracked beneath sediment, forgotten but not erased. When we found them, we saw not just stone, we saw evidence of thought, evidence of rhythm, evidence of life lived in touch with the earth. Their blades were not crude. They were refined, durable, unchanging. Their final legacy was not speech. It was edge, the forgotten tool. It lies in soil. The hand that shaped it has been dust for millennia. But the flake still shines, still sharp, still quiet. 1,000 seasons pass above it. Footsteps, rain, roots. Then, a gloved hand lifts it, and the light touches it again. DNA stone outlasts memory. Neanderthals left no stories, no names, no voices carved into walls. But the tools they made, they remain. And from them, we know how they thought, how they survived, how they taught and touched. Each flake is a sentence, each core a chapter, each side a library without words. And when we hold them, we hold hands across 2,000 generations. Stop sign the end of the toolmakers. When the Neanderthals disappeared, the Mysterian toolkit disappeared with them. Homo sapiens brought new styles, blade-based tools, bone-sewing needles, microliths. But the Neanderthal way, it ended. Clean flakes, short handles, heavy scrapers, vanished, but not forgotten. Because in the museums, in the boxes, in the hands of careful researchers, the old edges still speak. And they say, we were here. We knew how to shape the world. And we did. The tool sits quiet now. No blood on its edge. No hands to lift it. No fire to soften the pitch. But once, someone shaped it. Someone tested the weight. Someone gave it to a child or laid it by a grave. And now it rests. Its silence sharp as ever. Not broken, just waiting. Stone outlives us all, but it never forgets. Before the spear, before the shout, before the red on stone and skin, there was silence. There was fog, and breath, and waiting. The hunt did not begin with killing. It began with listening. Fog the hunting ground, fog, forests, and valleys. Neanderthal hunts began at dawn, not in open fields, but in broken forests, rocky gorges, river corridors. Sites like Neumark Nord, Germany, and Morin, France, reveal herd movements tracked through marshes. Animal remains clustered in traps near slopes and water. Signs of seasonal return to key hunting locations. Fog in the valleys. Hoofprints in the mud. Breath steaming in the cold. They waited. They studied the ground. They knew how the earth spoke when stepped on. Deer tracking without words. Neanderthals lacked written language, but their understanding of movement was profound. Evidence shows ambush points selected with care. Hills used to spot prey. Wind direction understood. Human prints overlaid with animal tracks. They read bent grass, disturbed leaves, cracked ice, broken branches. And in those signs, they read intent. Dawn over the ridge. The herd passed here hours ago. He kneels beside the hoofprint, half filled with frost. He presses his fingers into the edge. Still soft, still warm. He rises. They are close. He moves forward, not running, but folding into the trees like a shadow. Behind him, 3 more figures follow. Quiet, crouched. Each step a story they don't speak. But no, Boinero weapons of the chase, Skåningen and beyond. At Skåningen, archaeologists uncovered wooden spears over 300,000 years old, carefully balanced, fire-hardened, weighted for thrusting and short throws. These weapons, found with butchered horse remains, prove Neanderthals hunted large game. They used design tools, not opportunism. They coordinated movement and distance, The design was precise, heavier at the front, sharpened to penetrate deep, polished for grip. They hunted not with savagery, but with engineering. The spear is ready. She grips it near the middle. The shaft is cool, smooth, familiar. Her fingers check the balance, just behind the point. She tests the swing, slow. Draws a breath. This is the third spear she's made. The others are gone now. Broken. Lost. This one must fly true. Hunting together. Evidence of coordination. At Lockhart de Saint Brelade, Jersey, over 20 mammoth carcasses were found below a cliff. Theories suggest Neanderthals drove herds toward natural traps, used group coordination to funnel movement, took advantage of landscape features. Such hunts required shared intention, timing, signal gestures, or sounds. There is no doubt they hunted together, whether family bands or larger temporary gatherings. They moved as one, and when they struck as a group. Thought balloon emotional texture, the waiting, the tension. Hunting wasn't all action. It was hours of stillness, cold, fatigue, anticipation, and within that silence, the body held its breath. The mind hovered between fear and purpose. They were not machines. They were flesh. They hungered. They shivered. They hoped. And every hunt was a gamble. Fog before the charge. The fog curls low in the valley. The wind changes. She crouches beside the birch trunk, hand against its bark. The deer are near. They can smell them. But if they move too soon, the herd will scatter. Her jaw is tight. Her spear arm aches. But she waits. Behind her, her brother signals. 2 fingers. They're ready. She exhales, not to steady herself, but to remember the silence. One last time. This was the terrain of the hunt. Not noise, but watching. Not chaos, but design. The fog, the tracks, the readiness. The next segment will guide us into the moment of the chase, the pursuit of prey, injury and adrenaline, cooperative roles, drivers, flankers, finishers. What fossil joints and trauma patterns reveal about real hunting impact? They are waiting still, knees bent, shoulders low, spears gripped tight. Then, a rustle, a cry, a sudden flurry of hooves on wet earth. And the chase begins. For the charge, moment of motion. When the signal came, it was not shouted. It was a nod, a wave, a hiss of breath. Neanderthals charged with wood-shafted spears, intimate knowledge of terrain, coordination that came from years in each other's shadow. They did not sprint blindly. They circled, cut off escape, funneled prey into traps or narrow paths, finished with close, brutal thrusts. At Coombe Greenall and La Pharisee, bones of bison and deer show, kill sites in enclosed gullies, evidence of head or flank targeting, repeated activity at seasonal points. They knew how their prey moved, and made it move wrong. The flankers. She bursts from the birch cover. Mud grips her ankles. The deer scatter, most to the west, just as planned. Her cousin rises from the gully lip, roaring. Spears fly, 2 miss. The third strikes just above the shoulder. The deer stumbles, bleeds. She races to cut off its path, breathing fire. Her calf twists, she falls, hard, but rolls, spear first. The deer sees her, slows. Just for a second. Enough. Handshake rolls in the hunt. Hunting wasn't individual. It required drivers to flush prey forward, flankers to redirect motion, blockers to stand at escape routes, finishers close in, spear, and secure. These roles were flexible, based on terrain and skill, likely learned from youth. Injury patterns in Neanderthal skeletons match. Bull riders and modern-day rodeo athletes. Impact trauma, rib breaks, shoulder dislocations. Dominant side injuries, especially in the right humerus and clavicle. Frequent healed fractures, suggesting survival after trauma. They didn't avoid risk. They managed it. Together. Scull the cost of close hunts. Unlike Homo sapiens, who later used throwing spears and bows, Neanderthals often hunted at close range, relied on thrusting weapons, faced direct retaliation from prey. This is evident in La Pharisee 1, crushed rib and broken leg. Ahmed 1, severe arm trauma, likely from direct impact. La Chapelle aux Saints, hip deformities from chronic injury. Despite these injuries, they lived long lives. This tells us they were cared for. Their injuries were not fatal because others helped. Community mattered, even in recovery. A failed hunter was not abandoned. The wounded one. The man stumbles, shoulder torn. Blood stains his tunic of stitched hide. The bison is down now, breathing still, but not rising. His cousin kneels beside him, presses moss into the wound. Says nothing, just waits, eyes on the trees. Another man arrives, brings fire, cleans the stone blade, prepares to cut meat. They say little, but everything is said. He won't hunt tomorrow, but he will again. Fire post-hunt exhaustion, the stillness after. When the adrenaline faded, when the kill was secured, the work began again. Spears were gathered. The prey was skinned. Meat was divided. Bones were cracked for marrow. Hides were rolled for carrying. Sometimes the fire was started right there in the field. Sometimes they carried it all back. Always, with aching limbs, blood on their arms. In silence, there was no celebration, only breath. They did not hunt for sport. They hunted because they had to, because winter was near, because children needed marrow, because they had learned the language of the land. And in that chase, they lost blood. They broke bone. But they also remained human. Together, the animal has fallen. Its breath has gone. The steam from its wound curls into the air, then fades. The hunt is over, but the work has just begun. And in the hush that follows blood, they begin to divide. Cut of meat, the butchering circle. At sites like Coombe Greenall and Morin, archaeologists have found butchered animal remains clustered near hearths. Cut marks on bones, signs of skinning, dismembering, and filleting. Repeated activity layers, same kill zones reused over generations. They did not butcher randomly. They opened the chest cavity first to release heat. Removed organs quickly, heart, liver, kidneys. Separated limbs at the joints, not the shafts. Cracked long bones for marrow using hammerstones and anvils. The air filled with heat, blood, and breath. And always, with care. The first cuts. He kneels by the flank. The spear wound still bleeds, slowly. With his obsidian blade, he cuts the hide. Long, slow motions down the belly. The fat pulls away, yellow-white. Muscle beneath, quivering. She follows behind him, gathering the strips. Another stokes the fire. In silence, they unwrap the animal. From its skin, brain-meat division, social hierarchy, or equality. The archaeological record shows some sites have equal distribution of meat bones across the living area. Others show clustered high-value parts, skulls, ribs, marrow bones, near hearth centers. This suggests, at times, meat may have been shared communally. At other times, preference was given to certain members, elders, hunters, sick. There is no clear pattern, no single rule, but there is one truth. They shared, because one bison was more than one could carry, because survival was not a contest. It was a chain. Skull placement, the first signs of meaning? At La Côte de Saint-Brelade, over 20 mammoth and woolly rhinoceros skulls were found, arranged along a cliffside, facing outward, separated from the rest of the body. Similar behavior at Tor Farage and Marillac. Skull fragments placed in alcoves, some smeared with pigment or ash. Jawbones positioned apart. Interpretations vary. Practical? For drying brains, storing fats? Symbolic? To honor the animal? Spiritual? To keep the spirit near? We can't know, but we can feel that something mattered. The skull was not just meat. The horn one. They do not eat the head. Not today. She lifts it with effort, lays it on a flat rock near the ridge, places pine needles beneath. The children gather. One boy touches the horn, eyes wide. No one speaks. But when they leave, they do not take the skull. It stays, watching the valley. Fire ritual or routine. Some bones were burned in fire pits, carved or notched with lines, arranged in repeating patterns, buried beneath stone slabs. Was it belief? Was it memory? At Marillac, cave bear bones were found in circular rings, possibly placed deliberately. At Bruniquel, burned animal parts were arranged inside a stalagmite structure, 170,000 years old. Whatever it was not random. They returned to the same places. They marked the moments. They acted with intent. And that makes it human. DNA reverence in the act. To kill was to live. But they did not do it lightly. They waited for the right moment, risked their lives, worked until their muscles trembled, divided what was taken with care. And sometimes, they left a mark behind. A horn on a stone, a jaw on the shelf, a footprint in blood. Not as dominance, not as triumph, but as memory. They did not pray, but in their silence, as they cleaned the blade, as they cracked the bone, as they watched the skull stare back from its resting place. They remembered, and the animal lived on, in marrow, in hide, in warmth, in story, and in the stone edges. They carried home. The kill lies behind them now, but it is not over. What is hunted must be carried. What is taken must be tended. The body may rest, but only after the burden moves. Basket preserving the meat, evidence of planning. Neanderthals didn't just eat on site. They cut meat into strips, rolled hides into bundles, gathered fat, marrow, and organs, possibly dried meat over fires or smoke, preserved fat in stomach linings or hide pouches. At Abercrombie, archaeologists found repeated hearths layered over time, long bones showing delayed breakage, meaning they saved marrow for later, tool residue suggesting scraping and drying. They were not scavengers. They were planners, packing the load. She kneels beside the cut, muscle stripped clean, bones stacked. She takes the thigh meat, wraps it in a hide, ties it tight with sinew. 2 bundles already rest on her back. The fire behind them burns low. The forest ahead, darker than before. She stands, breathes, then walks. Bone what the bones tell us. Zooarchaeologists can read Neanderthal leftovers like a story. Cut marks at tendon points show skilled dismemberment. Missing bones indicate meat was removed and carried. Burned bones suggest preservation or disposal. Pattern breakage, midshaft cracks, reveals marrow access. At Cueva del Castillo, Spain, bones were singed, split, sorted, found near thin stone slabs, perhaps drying surfaces. There is no doubt. The meat wasn't just for now. It was for tomorrow. The walk back, endurance, and trust. They carried flesh, stone, bone, fat, memory. No carts, no beasts of burden. Only shoulders and arms and backs. Through forest, over ridge, across frozen streams. They walked in silence, one behind the next. And in that line was not just strength. There was trust. If one fell, another would lift the load. Crossing the stream, the rocks are slick with frost. She steps carefully, boots of softened hide soaked through. On her back, 20 kilos of meat. On her hip, the cracked obsidian scraper. Ahead, the smoke of home flickers on the ridge. She does not hurry. She does not speak. The stream sings quietly beneath her. She listens, then moves on. Thread hide, fat, and fire. Nothing was wasted. Hides were scraped clean, stretched on wood frames. Sinew used as thread, bowstring cord. Fat rendered over heat, for eating, lamp fuel, or waterproofing. Bones shaped into handles, beads, or burned for heat. At Pêche de Las and Coombe Greenel, residues on tools show. Animal fat mixed with ochre, possibly for preservation or hide softening. Ash pits used for long, slow burns, suggesting drying racks or cooking platforms. This was not mere reaction. This was knowledge. Of the body, of the earth, of the flame. Thought balloon emotional weight, pride, and cost. The return was not triumphant. It was quiet, aware, bone-tired. They carried more than meat. They carried the memory of the chase, the shape of the fallen, the cold breath of risk, and sometimes the grief of one who didn't return. But they kept walking, because home was not just warmth, it was others. She steps through the trees. The fire is closer now. The shapes of others, waiting, rising, approaching. They do not cheer. They do not ask. They see, and from one hand to the next, the weight is lifted. The hunt is complete. But the story will be told in meat, in scars, in embers, and in the quiet breath of a fire rekindled. The forest is behind them, the stone and bone and blood, now set down in warmth. The hunt is over, and the hearth waits. Fire the heart of camp, Neanderthal hearths. In site after site across Europe and the Levant, we find the same pattern. Flatstone hearths, circles of ash, often layered and reused. Arranged bones, broken for marrow. Tools, pigments, scraps of hide. At Abercrombie, researchers uncovered hearths layered hundreds of times over millennia. Activity areas defined around each fire. Clear signs of meat processing, tool making, and rest around the flames. These were not random burns. They were the center, the sun of a cold world. The firelit circle. She drops the last of the bundles by the fire. Her arms ache. The elder, toothless but bright-eyed, unwraps one. Grunts softly. Smiles. Children crowd closer. The smallest crawls over a hide, grabs a scrap of meat. A woman sits near the fire's edge, scraping a rib bone. Another mends a leather tie. No words. Just crackling, chewing, breathing. Together. DNA who ate first. No laws remain, but the pattern tells us. The very young and very old received food. High-fat parts, organ meat, marrow, were prized. Fires were shared, not hoarded. At Grotte du Renne, near hearths we find ornaments, pigment fragments, scraps of worked antler and bone tools. It was not just about food. It was about living, eating, talking, mending, teaching. The hearth was the first classroom, the first kitchen, the first home. Paw print stories without words. Neanderthals had no known language system like ours, but they had memory, and memory needs fire to hold its shape. So they told stories in gestures, pointing, mimicry, objects passed around, fireside reenactment. A child lifts a broken spearhead and mimics the throw. An elder draws a hoof print in the dirt. Another bangs stone against stone, a warning sound. And all listen, not with ears only, but with presence. The memory passed on. He squats beside the fire. The others are eating. He picks up a rib bone, dips it in ash, draws a curved line on the stone. Then another, then a horn, then hooves. The children watch. One whispers a breathy sound, "Huh," mimicking the deer. He nods, draws a spear, then lays the bone down. No applause, no voice, but the memory is there now. Held. Microscope what the ash tells us. The fossil hearths tell a tale of repeat return, same fires, same placements, year after year. Ash layering, indicating deliberate cleaning and reuse. Peripheral zones, tool crafting, hide scraping, food prep. At Pêche de LA's hearth show, multiple color layers. Ash mixed with pigments. Burned bones stacked deliberately. This wasn't just fuel. It was ritual, comfort, and identity. The hearth was where life reformed itself. After the hunt, thought balloon meaning in flame and flesh. The animal's body now lives in them. Its hide warms their backs. Its marrow feeds their bones. Its memory sharpens their young. Its breath flickers in firelight. This is not myth. It is memory. Stone cannot record stories, but it records presence. And in those blackened hearths, we find the echo of the moment when survival became meaning. The fog has lifted. The hunt is done. The meat is gone. The fire is quiet. But in the ashes, Something lingers. Not the kill, not the blood, but the bond of those who walk together, fall together, rise again together. Stone holds the edge, ash holds the breath, and we remember, because they did. Winter came slowly, not with snow, but with silence. Birdsong faded, water slowed, the trees wore white bones, and beneath the rock, they waited. Fire was not warmth, it was survival, and breath became the only sound. Snowflake, the coming of the ice. During marine isotope stage 3, the Neanderthal world dipped in and out of cold. Massive glaciations blanketed northern Europe. Open-steppe tundra replaced forests. Herds migrated south. Food became scarcer. Shelter became sacred. In regions like Dordogne, France, and Zafarea, Spain, winter meant longer fires, deeper caves, less movement, more watching. Cold pressed into bones. Smoke curled against the stone. Time thickened, and the world grew. Quiet. Seen, the smoke in the roof. She crouches near the fire. The stone above her is blackened. The wind cannot reach them here. But the smoke, it gathers. Her eyes sting. Her child coughs. She moves the fire again, just slightly. A little more oxygen. A little less flame. The warmth is worth it. They sleep in shifts. Rotate near the coals. And whisper dreams into the ash. Shelter in the stone, cave evidence. At Pech de Las, Roc de Marseille, and La Pharisee, archaeologists found hearth after hearth, burned over again. Soot ceilings in low-roof shelters. Stone windbreaks built from slabs. Compact living zones, sleeping, cooking, mending. In these shelters, they lined the floors with hides and plant bedding. Huddled in clusters. Positioned fires near the entrance for smoke control. Inside, temperatures were often just above freezing. But with fire, with meat, with each other, they survived. Fire as timekeeper. Without clocks, days blurred in the dim caves. But fire marked. Morning, rekindled coals. Midday, fresh fuel gathered. Evening, cooking. Night, embers banked for sleep. The fire was a place to gather. A boundary from dark. A metronome for existence. At Grotte du Renne, burnt bone, antler tools, and ochre fragments all cluster around hearths. Each item speaks of use, of hands, of thought, of trying. The fire burns lower now. Fat sizzles, but the meat is gone. And so they turn to the bones. Because winter asks more than flesh. It asks for everything. Bone marrow and bone grease, last resort foods. When meat ran out, Neanderthals turned to marrow, rich in fat, stored inside long bones. Bone grease, boiled or pounded bone to extract lipids. Stomach contents of prey, sometimes reused for plant fiber. Stored dried sinew or organs packed in hide. At Pech de Las and Grotte du Renne, bones were split mid-shaft, precise for marrow access. Smashed on anvils, sometimes repeatedly, left with shatter patterns that indicate grease extraction. These were not the first choices. They were the last hope. Seen, the crack of bone. She lays the femur on flat stone, lifts another, cracks it, hard, a sharp ring, like flint, a split, a slow ooze of yellow-white fat. The children stare, the elder groans. She scrapes it with a sliver of wood, smears it on bark. They pass it around, no one smiles. But no one stops. Char decreasing physical evidence of seasonal hunger. Bone chemistry from Neanderthal fossils shows fluctuating nitrogen and carbon isotopes, matching lean versus rich seasons. Lines in tooth enamel from malnutrition. Bone thinning in juveniles, long periods of interrupted growth. At El Sidron, Spain, bones revealed high meat reliance in some seasons. Gaps where calories dropped. Winter. Yet still, they lived. They scavenged. They planned. They suffered. Tools for winter. Low movement. High value. In winter, hunting waned. But other skills rose. Bone and antler shaping for tools and ornament. hide scraping and sewing, awls, stone flakes, repairing broken weapons by firelight, sharpening reused flakes instead of making new ones. At grotte de phase, ornamented bone and pierced teeth suggest long hours of slow, intentional work, possibly even symbolic use during seasonal stillness. In the dark, they shaped light, one edge at a time. Seen, the awl and the hide. He scrapes the hide slowly, stone awl in hand. Tiny holes, thin fiber, softened with fat, each stitch a memory of the animal, of the wound, of warmth to come. He doesn't speak, but the girl beside him mimics the motion. A lesson, without words. ZZZ winter emotion, stillness and sadness. Even without language, emotions leave traces. The long dark likely brought exhaustion, stillness, melancholy. They slept more, spoke less, huddled often, cried quietly. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers in polar climates show dark season depression, fire gazing as passive comfort, use of repetitive labor to calm anxiety. We cannot know their feelings, but we see them in the soot and the silence. Fire as ritual, the center that held. Some hearths show repeated decoration, ochre sprinkled in ash. Organized burnt zones, outer ash ring, central flame. Charcoal patterning that implies shared sitting spaces. Intentionally placed burnt bones or antler. At Grotte du Rhin, traces of burned ochre suggest ritualized fire lighting, possibly storytelling or gesture performances. The fire was no longer just warmth. It was memory. Closing whisper, end of segment 2. She stares into the embers. The bone is cracked. The fat is gone. The belly aches. But beside her, the child still breathes. And so she places one more twig on the ash, watches the flare, closes her eyes, and dreams of thaw. In winter, things slow. The fire burns longer. The steps grow fewer. The breath takes effort. And sometimes, someone does not wake. There is no word for death, but there is a pause, and that is enough. Coffin evidence of burial. Across several sites, Neanderthal burial is strongly supported. La Pharisee, France. Multiple skeletons in deliberate pits. One adult male laid with tools. A child positioned with care, head to one side, knees drawn in. Roc de Marseille, France. Child placed in a shallow depression. Skull turned gently. Hearth nearby. Possible ritual fire? Shanidar, Iraq. Adult male with injuries, healed long ago. Pollen traces around bones. Possibly flowers placed in grave. Stones marking sides of burial. These are not accidents. They are acts of memory, of parting, of presence. Seen, the hollow in the floor. The fire has burned low. He does not move, not since the morning. They do not cry, not loudly. They dig where the cave floor softens. Carefully, not to hide, but to hold. His body is placed inside, arms crossed, a stone at his feet, his broken scraper beside his hand, ashes sprinkled over him, then silence, and then the earth again, meaning in position. Archaeothanatology, the study of ancient death practices, shows Neanderthals often placed the dead in fetal or resting positions. Grave cuts were shaped, not incidental. In some burials, grave goods were placed intentionally. Burials were near hearths, suggesting ongoing presence in daily life. This implies awareness of mortality, some form of grief, possibly even a concept of after, even if not belief. And most profoundly, they did not leave the dead exposed. They brought them home. Baby-child burials and care. At La Pharisee and Roc de Marseille, children's graves are more carefully shaped than adults. Bodies positioned with spatial sensitivity. Tools, stones, and hearths placed nearby. These are not throwaways. They mourn their young. The fragile bones were laid with strength. Old woman, elder survival, and intergenerational living. Shanidar one lived with crushed leg, blindness in one eye, hearing loss, Evidence of survival for years. Someone fed him, sat with him, helped him move. This means communal compassion, shared emotional life, human connection beyond utility. They did not leave the weak. They made room, even when food was thin and winter was cruel. Scene: the elder and the girl. The old woman breathes raggedly. The girl wraps another hide over her, feeds her bone broth, slow, careful. The woman coughs, nods. Her hand, fingers gnarled, rests on the girl's knee. They do not speak, but the girl does not leave. Not until the fire burns low. Hibiscus, signs of offering. Burnt ochre. Flowers, possibly shanadar. Stone tools with no wear. Bones arranged near heads. At Teshik Tash, a child's grave was ringed with ibex horns. At Sima de los Huesos, older Homo heidelbergensis ancestors left accumulations of bones in a single shaft, possibly ritual deposit. There are no words left behind, but there are choices, and in those choices is love. The fire still burns, but there is a space where someone once sat. The others shift inward, not to forget, but to remember together. One bone becomes two, one hide becomes three, and the silence between them holds more than words ever could. They knew how to grieve. They knew how to carry even the gone. A single sound breaks the stillness. Drip from stone, from ice, from time itself. The cold has not gone, but something beneath it moves. Some behind small cloud, the earliest signs of spring. Before the sun was warm, there were signs. Streams began to trickle. Snow crust softened. Small birds returned to lowland edges. Pollen spores appear in ash layers, even in deep caves. At Peche de Las, thin bands of yellowish ash, birch pollen, fresh charcoal, signal the first hearths of movement. Not departure, yet, but readiness. The heart stirs before the foot moves. Seen, the first light. She opens her eyes. The cave wall, gray as always. But the smoke rises faster now. Outside, the drip of thawing ledge. She presses a hand to the earth. Still cold, but less cruel. She rises, checks her scraper, adds fresh bark to the fire. The day will be longer. That is enough. Toolbox, tools gathered, bundles tied. In preparation for leaving. Spears are sharpened. Flakes res-tacked in hide bundles. Broken tools reworked. Cordage made from sinew, roots, or rawhide. Tool caches at Roc de Marcel show. Carefully bundled lithics. Cut marks on hides for straps. Partially burned spear points, possibly hardened. It was not a sudden departure, but a measured resurfacing. Stone by stone, edge by edge. Fire sites cleaned. Some hearths were dismantled, raked smooth, covered in ash. In stratigraphy, this shows as flat, sterile layers between activity. Sudden absence of bones/tools. New fire rings a meter or more away. This suggests intentional resetting, a cleansing or readiness for transition. They did not abandon chaos. They closed the season with calm, preparing the hide. She stretches the final piece of softened deer hide, scrapes gently, cuts slots for ties. The child hands her a sharpened flake. Together, they roll it, tool and skin, and tie it with dried gut. She hums, soft, broken, a rhythm, like steps to come. Emotional shift, quiet anticipation. As days lengthen, behaviors shift. Less fire sitting, more standing, sharpening, walking inside the cave. Restlessness in posture. Playfulness returns among children. Murmured interactions increase. No words, but energy. Changes. The ache of cold becomes the itch to move. Seedling first plants and foraging signs. Though hunting is still lean, early foraging begins. Roots dug from thawed ground. Buds chewed. Stored berries soaked to soften. At some sites, burned plant residues in hearths. The body craves green, even if memory has forgotten what that means. Closing whisper, end of segment 4. The fire burns low, not from need, but from habit. The cave still holds them, but not fully. They glance toward the entrance now. They stand longer, stretch more often, and in their chest, something opens. It is not yet the season of movement, but the soul has already left the cave. The cave mouth is still dark, but it no longer feels like night. A toe presses into softening mud. Steam rises from rock. A step, then another. No fanfare, no farewell, just the quiet of leaving. Fossil signs of departure. Archaeological clues show how Neanderthals left winter shelters. Final hearth layers undisturbed, ash left intact. No fresh bones or flint debris. Tools removed, few abandoned items. Human waste zones gone, suggesting full group movement. At Roc de Marseille and La Pharisee, departures left behind. Clean hearths, swept living areas, carefully stacked and used stones. This wasn't escape. It was ritual closure. Scene, the empty hearth. The last of the coals has cooled. She stands over them. No smoke, no light. She presses a scrap of hide to her chest, then lays it in the ash. Not as an offering, not as loss, but as a memory, made visible. Paw prints tracks in mud and time. Outside the cave, early spring ground shows. Human and animal prints overlapping. Heel drags, elders or burdened walkers. Small prints beside large, children and adults together. Circular patterns, pauses, meetings, shifts in direction. These are more than tracks. They are questions. Where did they go? Who looked back? What did they carry? Fire the emptied center. In every known winter shelter site, the hearth remains. The tools vanish. The ash settles. The walls go silent. And yet, something lingers. At Pêche de LA's, charcoal maps show sitting zones, unchanged over decades. Fire restart points, identical locations. Children's play stones, untouched. It's as if they meant to return, as if memory could be placed, like a stone, and found again. Turning back, the boy pauses at the cave mouth, looks behind him, just dark, stillness, a curl of ash caught in wind. He blinks, steps forward. The cold breath of the past sinks back into stone. DNA what winter taught. They did not escape death, but they carried the shape of each absence. Forward, they learned which wood smoked, which stone sparked, how to sleep with grief, how to name nothing, but still remember. These things are not in bones, but they are in us. We still gather around flame, bury our dead with care, feel time shift when spring comes, look backward before walking on. The cave is quiet now, ash-layered, but undisturbed. The soot darkens the ceiling still. Tiny bones lie beneath the floor, but the fire is out, and far down the slope, in thawing grass, footprints vanish into light. The winter has passed, but it remains in everything they carry, and in everything we remember. The world is soft again, not warm, not yet, but moving. Water slides over stone. Ice breaks in long, slow sighs. The air smells of moss, mud, and thaw, and they follow the sound of the river, because where it flows, life may follow. Water wave rivers in Neanderthal life. Rivers were drinking sources, migration corridors, tool washing zones, foraging paths, markers of territory. At many sites, rivers are never far. Salzgitter-Lebenstedt, Germany, on the banks of a cold river. Morin, France, evidence of mass animal processing near floodplain. La Côte de Saint-Brelade, cliff edge near ocean, but freshwater inland. Stone tools and butchered bone are found near the flow. They may not have fished with lines, but they watched and waited for water to bring life. Scene, the bankside morning. Mist rises from the river. Their feet press into soft silt. Water slides over toes. A child crouches, fingers tracing tadpoles. A man kneels, washing a hide. The old woman stares downstream, blinking. Bird calls. A splash. A ripple. They freeze. Not in fear, but in awareness. This place gives Fish evidence of fish or aquatic use. Neanderthal sites show subtle aquatic connections. Burned freshwater mollusk shells, some Iberian sites. Charred fish bones, rare, but found at Cueva de los Avianes. Water-reed impressions in bedding layers. Stable isotope evidence shows occasional freshwater protein. While not regular fishers, they likely scavenged stranded fish, used hands or spears in shallow pools, watched animal behavior to locate water prey, and they drank, often deeply, from cold, clean flow. Kitchen knife the river as a butcher's table. Morin, dozens of bison bones near a river bend. Cut marks, marrow access. Fire residue nearby. Seasonal floodplain. They may have driven prey toward mud, waited for weakened animals. Processed kills at river's edge. Stone tools, gleamed with water, and blood, and bone, became memory. Scene, river meat. They dragged the carcass across the stones. Its flank torn open. One woman kneels beside the spine, flint in hand. She slices, rinses, slices again. The water carries the blood away. The air smells of iron and moss. No words, only motion, precision, gratitude. National park rivers as paths, migration routes. Neanderthal movement often followed terrain. River valleys gave navigation without maps. Freshwater kept groups supplied. Lowland routes avoided exposure. At Skaaningen, wooden spears were found, near lake/river edges, in context with butchered horse bones, suggesting ambush or scavenging near water. They were not wanderers. They were readers of flow, droplet ritual or rest. Some water zones show pigment residues, ochre near riverbeds, stones stacked oddly, burn marks not near hearths. Speculation only, but perhaps these were places of pause, places of reflection, places where the dead were remembered, or simply where silence felt right. The river does not need belief, but it offers space. The water moves, and they move with it. The tools are wet, the hides drip, the bones are clean, and the silence they carry echoes in the hush between ripple and shore. This is not escape. It is return to something deeper than land, to something older than fire. The air is wet with silence. A reed bends. A hoof prints into clay. They do not chase. They wait. Because hunger, real hunger, does not shout. It listens. Horse watering prey. Who drank? Who died? Neanderthals tracked animals to rivers. Wild horses, skittish, fast, but patterned. Bison and aurochs, strong, but cautious. Reindeer, migrated with seasonal regularity. Boars, bold, but distracted when foraging in wet soil. At Salzgitter-Lebenstedt, spears found near butchered reindeer bones. Stone tools used on limbs, spine, and head. Many bones burned, suggesting fireside processing nearby. These sites were chosen, not stumbled upon, because animals must drink, and where they drank, they bled. Seen, waiting in reeds. A line of reeds shivers in breeze. Behind them, 5 shadows. Still, they've watched this spot for 3 mornings. Today, the wind is right. A snort, a hoof, a flash of flank. The man shifts, raises the spear carved from spruce. The world tightens. And then, thrust. Axe group cooperation, the silent drive. Near rivers, Neanderthals likely drove animals into mudflats or shallow bends. Used terrain to limit escape. Positioned themselves in teams, each at strategic points. Killed fast and together. At Morin, remains of 96 bison suggest coordinated butchery, single event mass kill, tools from multiple individuals. Fires nearby, cooking, tanning, smoking. This wasn't one hunter. It was many hands, many eyes, one mind. The kill. The bull stumbles in muck. Its cry echoes. Another spear lands, from the right. Then another. The beast groans, shudders, falls. The woman wades forward, eyes locked. She kneels, hands steady. Her knife is stone. Her heart, steel. Not out of hate, but out of need. Tool use in wet environments. Wet hunts required. Durable spears. Fire-hardened wood like spruce, hazel. Water-resistant bindings, sinew soaked in fat. Flint flake knives carried on hide belts. Stone anvils used to break bones on flat rock near the water. At Skåningen, wooden spears were over 2 meters long, aerodynamically carved, balanced for throwing or thrusting, found with horse remains. Their work was precise, in silence, in water, in life and death, animal bones as evidence. At riverside kill sites, bones show cut marks on key muscle zones, thighs, shoulders, neck, fractured marrow bones, scapulas cracked to reach sinew, some skulls smashed for brain tissue, fat source. These are not chance. They knew where the fat was, where to slice, when to stop. Even the footprints in mud reveal butcher stances. One knee down, one foot planted. They did not waste. They could not afford to. Seen, the blood pool. The horse lies in the shallows. The water stains red. Steam rises. The child watches, eyes wide. The man gestures softly. A muscle, a tendon, a way of cutting. The child mimics. A lesson, taught in silence, carved in blood. Brain what this meant. River hunting wasn't just survival. It was strategy, memory, risk, skill, transmission. These sites show that Neanderthals understood animal behavior, planned across days, moved as groups, honed tools to terrain. They were not brutes. They were hunters of rhythm. And rivers were chapters. In the hunt, the wind stirs the reeds. The blood dries on stone. The bones cool in silt. They rest, not with pride, but with quiet relief. Another day, another kill, another night with fire and flesh. And the river keeps flowing, carrying their echoes. Into time, the hunt is done, but the work begins. The blood is washed. The flint is rinsed. The body is broken, gently, and the river watches, carrying whispers of smoke and bone. Downstream, fire smoking, drying, and fire zones. Near riverbanks, archaeological hearths show scattered charcoal layers, not centralized cooking fires, but spread for drying racks. Long fires, possibly for smoking strips of meat over time. Bone grease rendering pits, shallow holes with fire-darkened stone. At Morin, bison remains show selective preservation cuts, especially fatty areas. Char marks suggesting smoke drying. Crushed bones for marrow oil, possibly smeared on meat or tools. This was not just food. It was storage. For days when no hoof prints came. Seen, the drying line. They stretch raw meat over sticks. Thin strips, dark red. The smoke curls beneath. A child fans the fire. The smell, sharp, fatty, rich. She checks the texture with a fingertip. Not too dry. Not yet. Behind them, flies buzz. She adds more moss to the smoke. The river breathes cool nearby. The sky opens slightly. And the day becomes nourishment. Lotion bottle bone fat and tallow. Neanderthals relied on. Bone grease, boiled in stone-lined pits. Brain tissue, rendered over fire. Tallow, used for lighting, sealing, softening hides. At riverside kill zones, archaeologists find crushed long bones near hearths. Burned pebbles for boiling in skin pouches. Soot layers rich in fatty acid traces. This fat fed infants, elders, the lean body craving calories after cold. It was wealth, and it was made by patience. Ox hide working and craft near water. Rivers offered perfect zones for hide work. Clean water to rinse skins. Flat stones for scraping. Mud to weigh down stretched hides. Smooth river pebbles used as softening tools. At Salzgitter Lebenstedt, hide working signs include repetitive scraping cut marks. Flint microblades dulled on hide. Burned hide bits near tanning zones. And always, a rhythm. Soak, scrape, smoke, fold, rub, restretch. They weren't making beauty. They were making shelter. The hides circle. 5 women sit around the stretched skin. One sharpens a flake. Another softens a strip with deer fat. A girl sings softly, fingers rubbing a pebble along the grain. The sun dips. A man comes back with bark. He watches, quiet, not interrupting. This is their craft. The silent shaping of survival. People holding hands camp rhythms around river work. The camp stretches wider now. Meat zone, flies and fire. Tool zone, flint and bone shards. Hide zone, scraping and rubbing. Children's zone, near reeds, shallow pools. Elder rest zone, warm hides laid on stone. These were not random. They were structured, shaped by terrain, water, fire, smoke, human need. At many sites, space reflects intention, and intention reflects thought. DNA, emotional texture of the work. There is joy in a full belly, a smooth hide, a sharpened flake, a good day of work beside kin, but also fatigue, blistered hands, smoke-stung eyes, worry for tomorrow. They didn't speak of these things, not aloud, but you can see it in how the blades were set down and how the fires were watched. Closing whisper, end of segment 3. The river smells of smoke now. The stones are slick with grease. The flies sing, and the fire whispers. And the hands, those same hands that threw the spear, now stretch meat and soften hide. This is not an end. It is a circle of taking, of giving, of shaping, and of living. The river runs, but gives nothing. No hoofprint, no ripple, no scent on wind. They sit and listen to absence. Paw prints when the prey didn't come. Stratigraphy shows moments when Neanderthals stayed by rivers, but caught nothing. No new cut-marked bones. Minimal flint waste. Thin fire ash. No fresh animal residue. At Morin, these quiet layers interrupt massive bison kills. At Les Perdels, hearths shrink. Burn layers thin. Sometimes the same tools were resharpened repeatedly. Flint reused until brittle. These were the days after. After hope. Before decision. Scene, the third morning. No tracks. No scat. The wind carries only water and leaf. She watches the child eat boiled root. His eyes are too quiet. The man breaks an old blade, sighs. There's no fat left. No bone to boil. The fire is smaller now. Even the smoke seems thinner. Bone scavenging and river scans. When game failed, some Neanderthals scavenged carcasses left by wolves or floods. Watched bird flocks circling overwrought. Followed bone-littered banks. Took meat from drowned animals, bloated, water softened. At Lockhart de Saint Brelade, scavenging marks appear. Cuts over existing predator gnawing. Bone split only in fatty zones. Tool marks suggesting quick, desperate butchery. It was risk, disease, rancid fat, rotting teeth. But hunger has no poetry. Droplet emotional landscape of lean camps. In these layers, you can feel it. Fires burned low. Sleeping spaces pulled tighter. Children quiet. Stone tools reused past utility. Long silences between gestures. These are the times archaeology cannot fully show. But the space between burnt bones tells its own story. A story of waiting. The bone that wasn't meat. The girl finds it in the reeds. A small rib, cracked and gnawed. She brings it to the fire. The woman turns it in her hand. No fresh meat. No marrow. Only memory. Still, she tosses it into the pot. Maybe something will rise. Brain decision points. Stay or move. River camps were not always permanent. When game stopped, roots thinned, river narrowed or flooded. Fires dimmed too often. They left. At sites like Les Perdels, whole layers vanish. One day, charcoal, tools, flint, meat. Next, windblown silt. Nothing. This was not panic. It was quiet resolution. They knew when to move on. DNA, teeth, and bones remember hunger. In Neanderthal remains, scientists find enamel hypoplasia, grooves in teeth from early starvation. interrupted growth rings in bones, isotope shifts in collagen showing nutritional stress. These are not seen in stone, but they live in the body. The child with wide eyes, the elder with brittle hands. They carried the season in their bones. The river has not changed. It still flows, soft and cold, but the fire is smaller. The meat is gone. The eyes look farther downstream. This is not failure. It is part of the pattern. To live by the river is to know its silence, as deeply as its sound, and still, to listen. The river does not say goodbye. It just keeps flowing. But they pause. One last time. The fire is ash now. The bones are buried or gone. The camp is quiet. The backs are bent not from grief, but from knowing. It is time. Traces of a camp left behind. Archaeology shows how Neanderthals left rivers. Used tools removed. Few flakes remain. Fire pits abandoned. No further ash buildup. Bones missing, dragged off, or burned completely. Footprint patterns cease. Wind-blown layers cover silence. At Salzgitter-Lebenstedt, the layers simply end. No violence, no destruction, just absence. And absence is a kind of signature. Luggage what they carried. Their packs were not heavy, but they held meaning. Stone flakes, a skin of fat, a carved antler, a glowing ember inside bark. One hide, smoke softened. Memories of fire and meat. The river gave, and now it asked nothing more. So they took only what mattered. Seen, the last footprint. She is the last to leave. She kneels at the edge of the stream, washes her hands. The water is cold, clean, still sacred. She dips a stone in it, places it in her pouch, then rises and steps onto dry grass. The print she leaves behind fills slowly with river light. Evergreen tree where they went. Rivers guided them to. High ground for summer shade. Meadows where deer fawned. Rocks warm with sun. Wind-scattered food. New places for old fires. Their world was not static. It pulsed, shifted with the season, turned with the herds. But the memory of the river moved with them. How water stayed inside them. Even far from water, they remembered. The shape of a horse flank in shallows. The soft crackle of reeds. The way blood runs downstream. The silence that meant hunger. The smoke that meant enough. These are not things left behind. They are carried. In hands. In rhythm. In the flick of a flint across a thigh bone. The river was never just a place. It was a rhythm. Within them. Seen. On the ridge, looking back. They crest the hill. The wind is new, pine-scented, high. He looks back. The river is a glint now. A line of silver between trees. He doesn't cry, but his chest feels tight. Not for what was lost, but for what was once given. He turns, walks on. National Park, the river as memory. Rivers shaped. The voice of their hunts. The warmth of their shelters. The cut of their tools. The smell of their childhood. The stories told with no words. They did not write, but they remembered. In motion, even now, we find bones in river silt, ash in floodplains, charcoal tangled in roots. They are still there, and still moving. Closing whisper, end of chapter 6. The river narrows. The forest deepens. But they do not look back now. There is new ground to cross. New hunger. New fire. Still, in every scrape of hide, in every glance downstream, in every bone they touch, the river remains, not in water, but in them. La Pharisee, the hollow. They dig with antler and hand. The earth is soft with cave damp. A child's body is wrapped in hide. The air smells of stone and salt. They lower him gently. Fold arms. Place a stone at his side. The woman hums. Low, slow, without words. Then silence. Then earth. Artist palette symbols in the soil, ochre and objects. Red ochre has been found. At Shanidar 4, possibly sprinkled on the body. At La Pharisee, in thin residue. Alongside burial stones at Didarii. Ochre meant blood, earth, fire, sacredness. It was not needed. It was chosen. Some graves held. Stones shaped by hand. Animal bones carefully placed. Tools near the body. Pigment. These were not offerings. They were reminders. Of skill. Of kinship. Of a life lived beside them. Brain grief without words. How do you trace sorrow in stone? By the curve of a spine laid with care. The hidden ash of fire burned all night. A tool placed beside a hand that no longer grasps. The absence of scavenging. The presence of stillness. At Shanidar, a man lived with a crushed skull and withered arm, yet survived for years. His death was not a relief. It was a loss. They buried him, not because he was useful, but because he was theirs. Closing whisper, end of segment 1. The ground closes, not to forget, but to hold. In the earth beneath their feet, they placed not just the body, but the weight of remembering. And even now, we find the shapes they made, in soil and stone, in silence, not words, but meaning, still warm. Beneath the earth, the body is gone, but the fire still burns. Not for warmth, not for cooking, but because something needs to stay lit. While they feel fire, and the stillness around grief. In many burial sites, hearths are found adjacent to graves, not over them. Archaeological layers show low, long-burning fires near burial pits. Ash-rich deposits without food bones or tools. No signs of daily use. These may have been morning fires, ritual cleansing, night vigils, spaces for quiet presence. In La Chapelle aux Saints, a single elderly man was buried with care. His broken spine and worn joints suggest years of frailty. Yet he lived. He was not discarded. He was accompanied. Seen, after the burial. They sit by the fire. No words, only breath. The child holds a smooth stone. It was his mother's. The man stares at the flame, his hands unmoving, his eyes wet, but not blinking. The woman adds another stick. It crackles, but no one turns. The silence is full, not empty. They are not alone, even in loss. Person standing, collective presence. Mourning as a group. Burial sites often include more than one body. La Pharisee, multiple children, adults in sequential pits. Shanidar, several individuals, some interred after long care. Didarii, child in fetal position, possible reuse of space. These were not isolated events. They suggest communal gathering, possibly shared grieving, final goodbyes, roles in burial, digging, watching, placing. Even children were involved, sometimes buried, sometimes witnesses. Grief was not hidden. Brain interpreting grief in the archaeological record. How do we know they grieved? We do not, but evidence whispers. Careful body placement. Grave goods with no utility. Fire without function. Repeated visits to the same graves, suggested by footprints and tool layers. We see time taken, effort given, stillness made visible. And that stillness feels human, even without language, even without names. Seen, the elder's bones. They return after days. The grave is cool now. Stones pressed firm. The woman kneels. Her fingers press the edge of the soil. She hums the same low tone. She did at the fire. Beside her, the child kneels. He doesn't speak, but his small hand reaches for hers. She grips it. 2 hands. One warm, one learning. Grief. Shared. Stones that marked or meant. Flat stones are often found, placed beside or over bodies. Leaned gently at the head or feet. Smoothed by handling. Coated with ochre. These are not tools. They are symbols. Perhaps memory markers. Spirit stones. Boundaries between this world and another. In Shanidar, stones rested near flowers. Not necessary, but chosen. Chosen means feeling. Wind face when they had no words. Grief is not just ceremony. It is sensation. The weight of missing breath. The hunger that stays. The hand not held. The fire burned for no reason. They did not have words, like mourning or loss. But they had the gesture, the stillness, the return to the grave, the stone placed twice. These are Our oldest forms of saying goodbye. Closing whisper. End of segment 2. The fire fades. The breath stills. But around that space, where one once slept, once smiled, once stood, the others gather, not to forget, but to feel. And the air is filled with memory. Even if nothing is said, not all who were buried had spoken. Some never walked. Some never saw the stars. But they were held by firelight, by arms, and finally, by the earth. Bed the tenderness of child burials. Across the Neanderthal world, we find graves of children. Diderii Cave, Syria, infant curled in fetal position, nestled in a pit. La Pharisee, France, multiple child skeletons in separate graves. Ahmed, Israel, child buried with flint tools, possibly intentionally placed. Teshik-Tash, Uzbekistan, child ringed with ibex horns in a shallow grave. These are not accidental burials. They show preparation, positioning, time taken, presence of others. Even the smallest were not left behind. Scene, Diderii, the curl. The grave was no longer than a cradle. Shallow, gentle, protected by overhanging rock. The infant's legs curled, as if still in the womb. A hide had once been placed beneath her. Soft, smoked, wrapped around her ribs. The earth had settled slowly. No disturbance, only time. The archaeologists found not just bone, but care. Signs of human care and deliberate burial. Child burials show unweathered bones, covered quickly, unscavenged remains, protected, often in shelters. Stone tools or objects near the body. Fire traces nearby, possibly lit during burial. At Roc de Marseille in France, a 3-year-old was buried in a natural depression. Her body lay gently curved, undisturbed. Soil around her showed different compaction, suggesting it was filled by hand. There were no flower offerings, no grand rituals, just quiet, intimate effort. The last breath. She is dying. The woman holds her close. The fire flickers. There's nothing more to feed her, but her skin is warm still, and her scent, milk and ash. Later, the woman presses her body into a shallow hollow, lines it with moss, tucks a stone near her hand. A final lullaby is hummed low, then earth, then sky. Brain, why would hunters bury infants? In subsistence lives, every mouth mattered. So why bury those who never helped hunt? Because they were part of the group. They carried hopes. They were named in the heart, if not with words. Their death left a hole, no matter how small their life. This is where archaeology meets emotion. And emotion shapes memory, even in the Paleolithic. DNA, the impact of loss in small groups. Neanderthal groups were small, 10, 30 individuals. Every person mattered. Every child was a future hunter, gatherer, firekeeper, storyteller. Losing one reshaped the rhythm. Anthropologists believe infant mortality was high, but those who died still received burial. And those who survived remembered. Through gestures, through stories, through silence. At Ahmed, the burial of a child with tools suggests imagined potential. What they would have done, what they could have become. Seen, the child who carried nothing. He never held a spear, never lit a fire, but they buried a blade beside him, not because he used it, but because they imagined he would have. In that gesture, a future was folded into the earth, and the blade did not cut. It remembered. Moai, meaning without language. There are no grave markers with names, no carvings, no prayers, but the placement of a child in a certain posture, the careful clearing of a space, the tools laid beside small ribs, the stone at the head, the moss packed near the spine. These are forms of language, not spoken, but deeply felt. Closing whisper, end of segment 3. They did not count her days. They counted her presence. And when she left, they did not forget. She was not just placed in earth. She was tended, with silence, with scent, with time. The sky took her, but the ground held her still. The ground is brown. The bones are pale, but between them, something else. A stain, a blush, a powder that should not be there. Red, iron-rich, chosen, not for survival, for meaning. Artist palette the presence of red ochre in burial contexts. Red ochre, iron oxide, was found at Shanidar 4, surrounding the body in pollen-strewn sediment. At La Pharisee, faint traces layered around burial zones. In Didarii, near the edge of infant burial soil, and across other Mysterian sites as portable fragments. It was not a natural feature of the cave's soils. It was brought in, applied, placed with purpose. This suggests ritual, symbolism, a belief in transformation, a mark of respect. Seen, the color laid softly. She opens the pouch. The red dust is fine, crushed between stones, scented faintly of earth and rust. She holds it above the chest, lets it fall, a whisper of color across bone. The others do not speak. They know this means something. They do not need to say what. The child is red now, warm, even in death, as if the fire still touched her. The symbolism of stone. Stones placed at Neanderthal graves were flat, smooth, sometimes worked, positioned at head, foot, or beside hands, occasionally pigment-streaked, not functional as tools, possibly spirit stones, sky markers, anchors of memory. They were chosen from outside, transported from riverbeds or cliffs. At Teshik-Tash, ibex horns ringed the child. These were not survival tools. They were framing. They turned death into geometry, a shape that held meaning. Fire as a bridge. Nearby hearths were found in burial layers. Ash without food remains. Charcoal without tools. Heat traces in otherwise undisturbed sediment. These fires may have been cleansing, mourning, light to guide, presence for the dead. They burned, not for life, but for farewell. The last flame. The grave is filled, but the fire still flickers. A figure kneels beside it, not feeding it, only watching. The flame catches in their eyes. A mirror, a final image of the one lost. The fire will die soon, but for now, it glows, like memory, pigment transport, and purpose. Ochre was not always local. Some sites show traces of ochre far from natural deposits, storage pieces in living areas, crushed pigment with pounding stones, possible trade or travel to pigment-rich regions. They sought color, even in lives filled with gray, brown, ash, and bone. This was not for beauty. It was for ritual, for meaning, for making death visible. Color became voice. Speech balloon, what did red mean to them? We do not know, but we feel. Blood, life, heat, transformation, return to earth, passage beyond. They had no words for these ideas, but they had color, stone, fire, gesture, and in that, they said, what we still struggle to. She is gone, but she is marked, not with a name, but with red, and stone, and fire. The soil remembers. So does the wind. So do the ones who buried her. Color fades, but meaning settles deep and holds. They left, but the earth did not. Even after the fires faded and snow washed over the stones, something stayed. A presence, a pull, a place that whispered. When they passed near again, cyclone, did they return to the dead? At several sites, archaeology shows multiple burials over time in the same area. Careful avoidance of disturbing earlier graves. Reused hearths nearby. Tool marks in old sediment layers. This suggests they remembered. They returned. They did not forget who lay where. At Shanidar, layers of burials are staggered, years apart, but always precise. No grave was broken, none reused. It was sacred, even if they had no word for that. Seen, the return. Years pass. The trees have shifted. The river's path has changed. But the cave is the same. He walks inside, alone, older now. The air tastes of stone. He kneels where the others once stood, brushes his hand across the dirt. Nothing is said, nothing needed. He remembers, without language. And so, the dead are still alive. World map, sacred geography. Neanderthal landscapes weren't just practical, they were emotional. Some areas were. Lived in, hunted in, slept in, but some were. Only returned to. Never camped upon again. Left untouched after burial. This creates a sacred map, not marked in lines, but in feeling. Graves were not just places. They were anchors, points of stillness, in a world always moving. Milky Way earliest evidence of belief. Did Neanderthals believe in an afterlife? We do not know, but they protected their dead, marked the graves, returned to the site, made effort beyond function. These gestures imply memory, meaning, perhaps imagination of something more. Not heaven, not myth, but continuity. The person was still, part of the world, even beneath it. The child's path. She runs through the woods. A child, laughter in her breath. She stops by a certain tree, kneels, places a smooth stone. Her mother watches, says nothing. The girl never knew the elder buried nearby. But she knows. This is where the stories turn soft, where voices lower, where hands brush soil, just a little more gently. That is enough. Spiral shell burial as a form of memory. The grave was not just for the dead. It was for the living too. To pause, to reflect, to hold grief, to pass memory to the next generation. We see objects laid where they would be seen again. Natural markers set like signposts. Tools left not in haste, but in ritual. Memory was made, with motion, and held, in earth. Counterclockwise arrows button burial as a circle, not an end. In life they walked together, hunted together, shared silence. In death they touched again, gathered again, remembered. Burial was not goodbye. It was a folding, back into the earth, that made them, into soil, that once gave flint, now takes bone, into darkness, that once held firelight, now holds stillness. They rise, turn from the grave, but they carry something, not a name, not a word, just a sense of shape, of time, of weight in the chest. And as they walk, into wind, into hunger, into firelight, they do not walk alone. The sky beneath the earth still shines. Inside them, it begins with a sound, a crack, a strike, a breath held in. Then again, stone on stone, not random, not wild, but chosen. A rhythm, a shaping. The hand knows. Raised hand, the Neanderthal hand, shape to shape. Fossil studies show a stronger grip than Homo sapiens. Robust thumb joints, power and control. Dense wrist bones, durability. Palm structure suited for pinch precision. Their hands were not clumsy, not primitive, but tuned for repetition, pressure, sensitivity. Archaeologist Adrian Zillman once said, Neanderthals weren't just muscle. They were sculptors. Their canvas was flint. Seen, the napping site. He squats near the edge of the cave. The flint core rests in his palm. Cool, smooth. He selects the hammerstone. Not too heavy, not too light. He breathes out. Then, a strike. Conchoidal fracture. A flake falls. He turns it. Inspects the edge. It gleams faintly in firelight. The others are quiet. They know this is sacred. The Mysterian Toolkit. The Neanderthal Toolkit is known as Mysterian, named after Le Moustier, France. It included scrapers for hide processing, points for spears, denticulates, saw-like teeth edges, levallois flakes, carefully prepared flint cores, notch tools, possibly for woodworking or sinew work. These weren't scattered shards. They were planned, predictable, replicable. Some cores were shaped for dozens of flakes. They conserved material, chose location, and reused blanks. This wasn't guessing. It was craft. Fire, a tool that breathed. Fire wasn't constant, but where it was found, it shaped everything. Pêche de repeated hearths, clay layers hardened with heat. Cabra and Coombe Greenel, ash beds and cooking pits. Neanderthal burn marks on bones, indicating controlled flame. Birch tar adhesives, made by dry distillation using fire control. Fire gave light, heat, protection, cooking, glue. It had to be kept, watched, fed, nursed like a child. The hearth. The fire breathes in the center. It snaps softly, casting red across stone walls. She turns a scraper in the light, tests it on hide, dulls an edge, moves toward the fire. The stone hisses gently in the warmth. She holds it over the coals, wipes it with ash. It gleams, tools and flame, born of each other. Bow and arrow hafting, combining materials. Neanderthals used sinew, wood, resin, birch tar, stone flakes to make composite tools, spears, cutting instruments. This required heat-treated resin, precise shaping of both stone and shaft, binding with plant fiber or tendon, drying time near hearths. At Campitello Quarry, Italy, and in Altdorf, Germany, archaeologists found birch tar lumps, the oldest known synthetic substance made by humans. They didn't stumble upon it. They learned. They passed it down. Repeat button repetition, memory, technique. Tool marks show consistency across generations, shared methods across geography, local variations in style. Some groups favored broad scrapers, serrated edges, back knives. This suggests teaching, imitation, tradition. Technique was memory, stored not in speech, but in movement. The flint rings again. Another flake, another tool. The fire glows, and in that warmth, not of the flame, but of the hands that shape beside it, there is history, not carved in stone, but released. There is a sound the hand makes, when it knows what it's doing. Not loud, not sharp. A-S-H-H-H-S-H-H-H-S-H-H-H. Of stone against hide. A quiet rhythm, like breath. This is not a tool. It is a song. Axe tools for daily tasks. Neanderthal life was shaped, not just by flint, but by what flint touched. Tasks they performed. Scraping hides to make soft coverings or bindings. Cutting meat during butchery after hunts. Splitting bone to reach marrow. Shaving wood for hafts and spears. Cracking tendons for binding material. Working sinew and fiber with pressure tools. Each task needed a specific edge. Thin for slicing, curved for peeling, notch for sawing, backed for grip. Tools weren't just made. They were chosen. Seen, the hide work. She holds the antelope hide tight with her feet, kneeling over it. In one hand, a scraper, the edge slightly dulled from use. She draws it down the grain, over and over. Shoo, shoo, shoo. The hide slowly yields. From coarse to smooth. Smoke curls from the fire nearby. The cave smells of ash, sweat, and fur. The child watches, mimics with a stick. One day, it will be stone. Magnifying glass tilted left microwear evidence, the marks of use. Microscopic analysis reveals polish and striations from hide, wood, bone. Edge rounding from repeated use. Resharpening marks at consistent angles. Use life cycles. Make use rework discard. This means tools had long working lives. People knew when and how to resharpen. Certain tools were kept for weeks, even months. Some edges were reshaped up to 6 times before discarded. The tool was not disposable. It was a partner. Toolbox carrying tools, portable skill. Neanderthals likely had. Toolkits carried between camps. Special flakes stored for quick tasks. Retouched tools reused for multiple roles. Some evidence suggests personal familiarity with certain tools. Reuse of specific cores across multiple sites. A preference for particular flint types or forms. One tool might shape the hide of a deer, cut the sinew of a mammoth, and then scrape bark from a tree. The blade knew many things, and the hand remembered each. It does not roar, not here. It sighs. It whispers. It moves like memory. The fire is not wild. It is held, not born of matches or sparkstones, but from ember, breath, and will. And in its glow, they live, Fire at the heart of life. Fire appears in over 70 Neanderthal sites. Burn layers in caves. Ash beds and charcoal remains. Heated flints and singed bones. Blackened hearth pits. Evidence from Pêche de l'Aise, France. Deep clay hearths, layered over time. Kabra Cave, Israel. Repeated fire spots, long-term use. Grotte du Renne, France. Fire associated with toolmaking. Fire was not random. It was central. Fuel, selection, and placement. They chose hardwood for long, hot burns, oak, birch, beech. Softwood for kindling, pine, juniper. Dry dung or moss for damp conditions. Bark strips for quick ignition. They placed fires near cave mouths for light, airflow, safety. In central living areas as social hubs. Near tool stations for reshaping, heating. Some hearths were used again and again. Layers of ash, compacted like the pages of a lived life. Scene, the long burn. He feeds the fire gently. Dry twigs, then bark, then birchwood. Smoke curls up the rock wall. The cave glows. He holds a tool to the edge of flame. Turns it. Waits. The edge changes color slightly. He lays it down. Beside the fire, he sharpens it. Not for battle. For survival. For making. Test tube birch tar, the first synthetic material. Neanderthals made birch tar glue. Found at Campitello Quarry, Italy. Tar residues on flint. Königsau, Germany. Pure tar lumps with fingerprints. To make it, they needed birch bark. Controlled heat in low oxygen conditions. A pit or container, stone, bark, bone. Time and patience. This wasn't accidental. It was technology. Tar glued. Flint to wood. Hide to frame. Memory to method. It was the first human-made transformation. Repeat button fire as transformation. Fire shaped. Meat, softened, preserved. Wood, hardened points. Stone, for better flaking. Bone, broken clean for marrow. Water, heated with hot rocks. Adhesives, tar, resin, pitch. They did not just warm themselves. They altered their world. Stone became blade. Tree became spear. Bark became glue. All because of flame. The hidden flame. It rains. He crouches beneath a stone outcrop. The ember pouch is dry, wrapped in hide, tucked with moss. He opens it. A faint glow. He breathes. Gentle. The ember pulses. He adds bark. Dry grass. A whisper. Flame stirs. He has not made fire. He has remembered it. And the memory burns quietly again. Fire's symbolic power of fire. Though no direct ritual fire remains have been confirmed, we find fires near burials. Ash layers undisturbed for generations. Special stones arranged near hearths. Pigment processing by flame. Some believe fire was a companion, a boundary between life and death, a presence, not just heat, but meaning. Where fire lived, they gathered, and where it died, they mourned. Counterclockwise arrows button passing flame, the gift of embers. Fires went out, but embers could be carried in bark bowls, kept under ash, rekindled from coal and flint. Children may have learned first to tend coals, blow gently, protect fire from rain. It was a shared task, a sacred task. The one who kept the fire, kept the future. The fire dims, not from hunger, but from choice. They let it settle. They sleep beside it. And even in sleep, they feel its warmth. Not just on skin, but in memory, in method, in love. They do not write, but they leave marks. Not in ink, but in placement. A flake here, a hearth there, a circle of bones, a flat stone used again and again. The floor becomes a story, not of words, but of choices. Camping, the organization of space. Excavations reveal central hearths surrounded by activity zones. Peripheries for sleeping and storage. Toolmaking clusters near light sources. Animal bones in separate discard piles. Rare overlap between clean and waste areas. This suggests spatial memory, deliberate planning, division of roles. At Grotte Vaufry, thin stratigraphic layers show repeating layout, as if they remembered where things belonged. Even after years, they returned to the same spots, knelt in the same corners, laid tools in the same patterns. This is architecture of the mind. Seen, the toolmaker's place. He sits near the entrance. The light is soft here, filtered by morning mist. Before him, a stone slab. He's used it before. Flakes from last season still lie near the edge. He brushes them aside, but not far. This is his place, his bench, his memory. The others know. They sit farther in. He lifts the core. The rhythm begins again. Triangular ruler toolmaking stations and cognition. Toolmaking zones show. Repeated napping in identical spots. Clusters of flakes and finished tools. Edge-shaping stones reused over years. Debris organized away from sleeping zones. Some sites show children practiced near elders. Others suggest shared workshops with designated spaces. This shows instruction, imitation, respect for layout. The mind that naps also plans, not just how the tool should form, but where the forming should happen. Brain the shape of thought in stone. From cognitive archaeology, Levallois's technique equals advanced planning. Requires envisioning the flake before it's struck. Mental rotation, spatial mapping, pressure control. This level of planning is similar to modern human prefrontal cortex use, seen in engineers, artists, architects, a sign of complex abstract thought. Every flake removed was a thought made visible, a map of mind. In Mineral, the teaching circle, the boy sits across from her. She holds the core, strikes once, flake falls, then another. She turns it, shows him the edge, then passes him a fresh core. His hands are clumsy. He strikes wrong. Stone cracks. She says nothing, just nods, and offers another. This is how thought is passed, not by word, but by shape. World maps spatial memory across time. In deeper cave levels, layers repeat the same use zones. Hearths reappear in same coordinates. Sleeping areas remain clear of tools. Butchery debris shifts with wind patterns, not intention. This suggests intergenerational knowledge, shared traditions of where to live, where to craft, a sense of place as memory. The cave is not just shelter. It is a home built in practice. Where one person sat, another will sit again. And remember, whole pit features and stone arrangements. Beyond tools and fire. Pits dug for unknown reasons, possibly storage or symbolic. Flat stones arranged with intention. Rocks smoothed over time by seated bodies. Pigment-streaked slabs near hearths. We cannot know what they meant, but we know they were chosen, used again, protected. A floor becomes sacred through repetition. Closing whisper, end of segment 4. The flakes are swept to the edge. The slab wiped clean. The tool rests beside the fire. And in the quiet, not of silence, but of understanding, the shape of space holds the shape of memory. They do not carve letters. They do not paint maps. But in stone, they tell us where they were, and how they lived, and where they'll return. The flake still lies there, sharp, pale, unafraid of time. It fits in your hand, but the hand that shaped it is gone. Still, the edge remembers. The legacy of stone. Stone lasts. We find scrapers worn smooth by hide, spears broken but still sharp, knives with resin still clinging, cores flaked on one side only. These were not buried for memory. They were dropped in use, left near fires, set down beside someone who never rose again. They did not leave these for us. They left them for no one. And still, we hear them. Seen, the tool beside the bones. She is curled inward, not posed, but peaceful. One hand beneath her head, one by her chest. And in that hand, a scraper, still sharp, still stained with ochre. Was it hers? A gift? A comfort? We don't know. But it lies there still, waiting for a task that will never return. Raised hand, the human touch in stone. Modern archaeologists feel a sense of recognition when holding a flake, as if the tool fits naturally, a shared ergonomic past, a strange closeness with a hand that lived 50,000 years ago. Tools hold, grip patterns, pressure marks, left or right-handed shaping clues. In some, thumb rests are worn smooth, edges chipped only on one side, always the same side. This is a kind of fingerprint, one not seen, but felt. DNA tools that outlived their makers. Some tools were reused by others long after the original maker died, modified for different tasks, passed to the next generation. A blade might begin as a hunter's tool, then become a hide scraper, then a child's practice flake. Its shape changes, its purpose evolves, but its story deepens. The maker is gone. The tool remembers. The heirloom flake. The boy touches the stone gently. It was hers, the one who sang to the fire, the one who showed him how to strike. It still bears the curve of her hand. He cannot say her name, but he knows her edge. He uses it today, to slice bark, to clean roots, and when he returns it to the pouch, he presses it close. The stone is not sacred, but her memory is. Person in lotus position, the ritual of shaping. The act of tool-making was repetitive, meditative, healing. It focused the body, steadied the breath, aligned the mind. It allowed space for grief, memory, quiet understanding. Some tools were made perfectly and never used, laid down beside the fire, or by a body, not for need, but for meaning. Milky Way poetry in survival. They did not call it poetry, but still, they struck stone in rhythm. They shaped with care. They touched edges that drew no blood. They saw beauty in balance. One flake could save a life, or hold a memory. One edge could feed a child, or honor the dead. This was their art. Closing whisper, end of chapter 8. The cave is quiet now. The flint rests on the floor. The fire has cooled. The hands are gone, but the stone remains. Cool to the touch, warm with story. It shaped flesh. It touched fire. It heard breath. It remembers what we forgot.